Chapter 632. 160 years. Ao Feng turned around and stared at the young Ao Guang and his wife. The aura of death and lethargy on the two dragons, who were nearing the end of their lifespans, had been replaced by vigorous vitality. This was not something that could be covered up by illusions or other magical powers. Ao Feng knew that the divine secret talisman could help extend one's lifespan. However, it could only extend lifespan by 10 years for cultivators at the 6th realm and 3 to 5 years for cultivators at the 7th realm. However, Ao Guang and his wife had directly reversed 60 years. This was definitely not something that the divine secret talisman could do. Ao Feng stared at Li Mu and asked, How did you do it? Li Mu said indifferently, just set up a random array formation. The heaven-stealing array could extend the lifespan of at most 10 people at the same time. The cost of the array formation was related to the cultivation level and number of people whose lifespans were being extended. Xianxia and Xianxia's grandparents were only at the 6th realm. They only needed to set up a small array formation, and it would not consume too many spirit jades. With Li Mu's current wealth, he could definitely afford it. Ao Feng was stunned for a moment. Then, excitement appeared on his face. As the great elder of the Black Dragon tribe and the most powerful member of the Black Dragon tribe, he was actually at a loss at this moment. He rubbed his hands and asked tentatively, Can you also set up one for us? Then he added, The price is negotiable. 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 spirit jades. He knew better than anyone what an extra 60 years of lifespan meant to the Black Dragon tribe. With the Black Dragon tribe's talent, this meant that he could easily advance to the 8th realm before his lifespan was exhausted. Ao Yu, Ao Lei, Ao Dian, and Ao An also had the possibility of advancing to the Dao integration stage. Once they advanced, their lifespan would be extended by another 60 years. At that time, the Black Dragon tribe would dominate the entire world. At this moment, Ao Feng seemed to have already seen this day. His eyes shone brightly. However, Li Mu's next words were like a bucket of cold water poured over his head, completely extinguishing his dreams and ambitions. Li Mu looked at Ao Feng expressionlessly and asked, Do I look stupid? After Ao Feng recovered from his excitement, he realized a problem. The reason why Ao Guang and his wife could obtain such benefits was because they were the grandfather and grandmother of Li Mu's woman. In other words, they were Li Mu's grandfather and grandmother. What was the relationship between Ao Feng and Li Mu? If there was a relationship between them, it would be a relationship between them as enemies. At this moment, Ao Feng wished that he had 1 or 2 beautiful granddaughters. Unfortunately, his son was disappointing and only gave birth to 1 son. Ao Feng looked embarrassed as he said to Li Mu, I know that we had some misunderstandings before, but it's all in the past now. Li Mu pursed his lips and asked, Misunderstanding? You don't want the sun-shooting bow anymore? Although he still wanted the sun-shooting bow, it was obvious that he couldn't get it. He might as well give up on that thought. Ao Feng said firmly, No. Actually, the sun-shooting bow didn't belong to the Black Dragons. My ancestor Ao Xian accidentally picked it up one day. Li Mu continued, I made you lose a lot of spiritual jades. You won't hold a grudge against me because of this, right? Ao Feng shook his head and said, No, how could I? This is the compensation that I deserve. Li Mu smiled and said, If you want me to help you set up this formation, it's not completely impossible. It will depend on your Black Dragon clan's performance in the future. Overall, Li Mu was satisfied with Ao Feng and the Black Dragon clan's performance in the past few days. At present, the Black Dragon clan's talent and potential were indeed the best that Li Mu had seen. If he could turn them into reliable allies, he would have another powerful force to fight against the demon Dao. However, although the Black Dragon clan was strong, they were not under Li Mu's control. If he was not careful, he would suffer a backlash. Before he had absolute strength, it was impossible for him to set up the sky-stealing formation for Ao Feng and the others. Performance in the future was a very vague phrase, but at least there was still a glimmer of hope. The Black Dragon clan could only grasp this glimmer of opportunity and satisfy Li Mu. Only then would they have the hope of regaining their glory. At this moment, Ao Feng was extremely regretful. If he had known this would happen, he would not have wanted the sun-shooting bow and would not have become enemies with the Fugu school. At the same time, the 2 elders of the White Dragon clan also looked regretful when they saw Ao Guang and his wife, who were dozens of years younger. This should have been the opportunity for the White Dragon clan to rise, But because of their wrong decision, they had missed the opportunity to increase their lifespan by 60 years. The two dragons' thoughts raced as they tried to think of a way to redeem themselves. Although Ao Guang and his wife's talent was not high, with an additional 60 years of lifespan, they would definitely be able to break through to the 7th realm. At that time, when the two of them died, they would be the guardians of the White Dragon Clan. The two of them exchanged a few words through telepathy. The White Dragon Clan's Grand Elder suddenly looked at Ao Guang and said with a solemn expression, "Ao Guang." The Grand Elder had supreme authority in the clan. Ao Guang immediately said, "Here." The White Dragon Clan's Grand Elder Lao Dao said, "The two of us don't have much lifespan left. We can't protect the White Dragon Clan for long. After our discussion, we've decided to appoint you as the new White Dragon King. From now on, the heavy responsibility of guarding the East Sea will be handed over to you." When had the two elders been so polite to him? They even wanted him to be the White Dragon King. Ao Guang was stunned on the spot, not knowing how to answer. The White Dragon Clan's Grand Elder looked at him and asked, "Are you unwilling?" Ao Guang came back to his senses and immediately said, "I'm willing. Ao Guang swears to protect the East Sea and our clan." Li Mu could tell that the series of actions of the two elders of the White Dragon Clan were done for him to see. These two old dragons were also nearing the end of their lifespan. They had their eyes on the sky-stealing array. He did not look at the two of them at all. He said to Xianxia, "Let's go." At this moment, the White Dragon Clan's Grand Elder immediately stepped forward and said, "Sir, please wait. This matter is our White Dragon Clan's fault. 300,000 spiritual jades are not enough to express our apology. Please stay for a few more days and give us a chance to apologize." Li Mu did not respond. Instead, he looked at Xianxia and Ting Xian and asked, "What do you think?" Ting Xian held Li Mu's arm tightly and said, "I'll listen to you." Xianxia looked at her mother and saw that there was some reluctance in her eyes. She looked at Li Mu, nodded and said, "Then let's stay for a few more days." Li Mu did not say anything more. The White Dragon Clan had arranged a luxurious crystal palace for him. Li Mu sat cross-legged on the crystal bed and looked inside at the upper-level spiritual jades piled up like a mountain in the Heavenly Flask Cave. His heart was already blooming with joy. The sisters had given all the spiritual jades to Li Mu, so that Li Mu's trip to the East Sea and North Sea this time was even more fruitful than the trip to the Black Dragon Clan. With these spiritual jades, the strength of the Fugu School's disciples would usher in a big surge in 2 or 3 years. At a certain moment, Li Mu withdrew his mind and looked at the door. 2 figures pushed the door open and came in. Li Mu looked at Xianxia and Ting Xian and asked, "It's so late. Why don't you go to sleep? What are you doing here?" Ting Xian held Xianxia's arm, strode to the bed and said, "We're here to rest. We're your women. Of course we should be with you at night." Li Mu was stunned and said, "That was just a temporary measure. If I hadn't said that at that time, what reason would I have to save you?" A sly look appeared on Ting Xian's face and she said, "What temporary measure? You've already accepted the dowry of 600,000 spiritual jades. Do you still want to go back on your word?" "You." Li Mu looked at them. Xianxia avoided his eyes, but Ting Xian stuck out her chest and said, "Now the Dragon Clan of the 4 Seas knows that we're your women. I don't care how you want us to marry in the future. You have to be responsible for us." Li Mu finally realized what was going on. Although he was acting, they were clearly trying to turn the act into reality. Chapter 633. Ting Xian's feelings for him had always been clear, but Xianxia was different. She had always been very reserved, but this time, she actually followed her sister, which meant that they were really serious about each other. Fortunately, Li Mu had already expected this day. Their names were on the Empress list. All the names that appeared on that piece of paper could be written in the household register of the Li family. This matter had already been approved by the Empress. Today's Li Mu was no longer the little constable who had just met them. He did not evade or change the topic, but looked at them and asked, "Have you really thought it through?" Ting Xian pounced on him and threw him onto the bed. Her slender legs wrapped tightly around his waist, and said, "I have already thought it through thousands of times. I have decided that you are my man in this life." Xianxia grabbed Li Mu's hand shyly and said softly, I have also thought about it." The crystal palace was brightly lit. Xianxia and Ting Xian snuggled up to Li Mu on both sides, whispering softly. In another palace of the East Sea Dragon Palace, the White Dragon clan's first elder, Ao Yuan, had just ordered the White Dragon King to abdicate. The White Dragon King was only at the 6th realm, and was his nephew. A few years ago, Ao Yuan personally supported him to take the throne, and today, he personally pulled him down from the position of Dragon King. The future of the White Dragon clan was in the hands of Ao Guang's 2 granddaughters, but because of the previous mistakes, they could no longer make up for it. They could only settle for the next best thing, which was to bet heavily on Ao Guang. Ao Guang and his wife had a good relationship with them. When Ao Guang became the White Dragon King, the revitalization of the East Sea Dragon clan was on his shoulders. How could they, who had the blood of the White Dragon clan, not help him? While the 2 elders of the White Dragon clan were thinking about Li Mu, Ao Feng was also pacing back and forth in the residence of the Black Dragon clan. At a certain moment, he looked at the other black dragons and asked, "Think carefully. Are there any young, beautiful, unmarried female dragons in the clan?" The few black dragons racked their brains to think. The Black Dragon King shook his head and said, "No, all the female dragons who have reached the age of marriage have already found partners. As for the others, they are either too young or too old. Those who are neither young nor old are not beautiful enough." Ao Feng sighed. The only way he could think of to get on Li Mu's good side was blocked just like that. The 2 most obvious characteristics of this person were his greed for money and his lust for women. After plundering the 3 dragon clans, if the Dark Dragon clan wanted to offer him any more spiritual jades, they would have to go bankrupt. It was not the best choice. She could think of a way to deal with his lust. Ao Guang and his wife gained 60 years of lifespan just because they had 2 beautiful granddaughters. Ao Feng was so envious that he was about to cry. Unfortunately, the Dark Dragon race did not have such a beautiful young female dragon. Just as the Dark Dragon race's experts were at their wits' end, the Dark Dragon King Ao suddenly said, "I have an idea." Ao Feng immediately said, "What idea? Speak." Ao said, "Although we don't have them in the West Sea, other places have them. It doesn't have to be a dragon lady of the Dark Dragon clan. The Azure Dragon clan and the Silver Dragon clan can also do." Ao Feng glanced at him and said, "What does this have to do with our Dark Dragon clan?" Ao continued, "Although he's not from our clan, if we act as the middleman, we'll be able to change his impression of us even if we don't make any contributions." Ao Feng thought for a moment and asked, "What do you mean?" Ao said, "Don't forget, there is a debt in the South Sea. We haven't settled it with them yet." Ao Feng's eyes lit up. "You mean?" Early the next morning, Li Mu came out of the Crystal Palace with women in his arms. Xianxia and Xianxia held his arms on both sides with happy smiles on their faces. It looked like he had a good night last night, but in fact, nothing happened last night. The Empress had a name, but she did not give Li Mu the right to act first and report later. The Empress was forced to accept the result of Su He and Phantom Princess's matter. This time, if Li Mu acted first and reported later, what awaited him would definitely not be the same as before. At that time, he would definitely have to face the Empress's storm. In addition to this reason, Li Mu also had to take care of Wan Wan and Xiao Bai's feelings. After all, they were the first to appear by Li Mu's side, but they were repeatedly cut in line by others. In their hearts, they would definitely feel that Li Mu did not like them anymore. Little girls like to let their imaginations run wild, so he had to consider their feelings. The White Demon King's family originally planned to leave the East Sea, but after a night, they changed their mind and planned to stay here. Before leaving, the White Demon King looked at Li Mu meaningfully and said, "Take care of them, and remember to come back to the East Sea often." He did not let Xianxia and Tingxia stay. Instead, he let Li Mu take them away, as if entrusting them to him for the rest of his life. Li Mu nodded and said, "Don't worry, I will take good care of them." The mother of the 2 sisters also brought them to the side and said something. After that, the eyes of the mother and daughters were a little red. 2 hours later, Li Mu led the 2 sisters and the Black Dragon race to the East Sea's coast. On the way, Li Mu looked at Ao Feng and said, "After reaching the shore, return to Mount Baiyun first." Ao Feng rolled his eyes and said, "We still have some things to deal with. After we are done, we will return to Mount Baiyun." In the past, the Black Dragon race did not like Fulu School. After all, living under someone else's roof and being controlled by others was not a good life. However, The situation now was different. They wished they could stay at Mount Baiyun. Not to mention 8 or 10 years, if Li Mu could extend their lifespans by 60 years, they would be willing to move the West Sea Dragon Palace to Mount Baiyun. Li Mu nodded and said, "You guys go do your things first." He was not worried that Ao Feng and the other Black Dragon Race experts would run away. The backbone of the Black Dragon Race was at Mount Baiyun. The Black Dragon Race would not abandon their people. After Ao Feng and the others left, Li Mu, Xianxia, and Xianxia came to the East County. He accompanied them to walk around the East County and taste the local delicacies. They had been restricted for a long time and had not come into contact with the mortal world for a long time. Just as Li Mu was taking the two sisters to play and relieve his mood, Ao Feng brought the other 3 elders and the Black Dragon King to the South Sea Dragon Palace. The 4 elders and the Black Dragon King came to visit the strongest Black Dragon race in the 4 seas, which shocked the entire South Sea Dragon Palace. The Azure Dragon race and the White Dragon race were the weakest in the 4 seas. Only the Dragon King and the first elder of the Azure Dragon race were at the 7th realm. The Black Dragon race had so many experts that it was enough to destroy the entire Azure Dragon race. The Azure Dragon King led his people out of the South Sea Dragon Palace and asked nervously, "Elders and the Black Dragon King, why did you suddenly come to the South Sea?" Ao Feng glanced at him and said indifferently, "If I remember correctly, the Black Dragon race and your Azure Dragon race still have a marriage agreement, right?" The Azure Dragon King's heart skipped a beat. He immediately said, "It's because I did not discipline her well that the ignorant junior sneaked away. We have already returned the betrothal gifts double the amount that the Black Dragon race gave." Ao Feng looked at him coldly and said, "Do you think that returning the betrothal gifts double the amount can redeem the Black Dragon race's lost face? I have brought the betrothal gifts for you this time. Which dragon girl of the right age in your race do you have? We want to take them away. There are no dragon girls of the right age in our race." The Azure Dragon King looked worried. He finally gritted his teeth and said, "Manexen, come out." Behind him, a dragon girl's face was pale. She shook her head and said, "Father, I don't want to marry them." The Azure Dragon King's expression was solemn. He said, "This is a debt that our Azure Dragon race owes. You are my daughter. You must know how to sacrifice for the race." Ao Feng looked at the Azure Dragon King's daughter. A few black lines appeared on his forehead. This girl's appearance was average. She was tall and muscular, powerful and domineering. If the Black Dragon race gave a dragon girl like Li Mu, they probably would not have the chance to extend their lifespan by another 60 years. Ao Feng waved his hand and said, "Don't. Leave your daughter to your Azure Dragon race. We want the one from last time. You better find her within half a month. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite." Chapter 634. The Azure Dragon race originally had the opportunity to form a marriage alliance with the Black Dragon race, but a few months before the wedding, the Dragon Lady of the Azure Dragon race suddenly ran away and disappeared. Not only did the marriage alliance come to an end, but it also completely angered the Black Dragon race. Now that the Black Dragon race's elders and Dragon King came to question them, the Azure Dragon race had to give them a satisfactory explanation. Otherwise, the Southern Sea would never have peace again. The Azure Dragon King looked at one of his race and said coldly, "Ao Qin, look at how much trouble your daughter has brought to the Southern Sea." The middle-aged dragon lowered his head and said apologetically, "It's all my fault for not teaching her well. Please punish me, Dragon King." The Azure Dragon King waved his hand and said, "Punish? What's the use of punishing? If I punish you, will the Black Dragon race let us go? The most important thing now is to get your daughter back and solve the problem the Azure Dragon race is facing." Ao Qin looked troubled and said, "I also don't know where she is." The Azure Dragon King glanced at him and said indifferently, "Don't think I don't know. You are still in contact with her. In the past, the Black Dragon race didn't force you, so I could turn a blind eye. Now that we are facing a strong enemy, I can't ruin the entire Azure Dragon race because of her." Ao Qin lowered his head and was silent for a long time. Finally he sighed and said with difficulty, "Okay, I will call her back." Li Mu brought Xianxia and Xianxia to play for a few days and then returned to the divine capital. Xianxia and the Empress hadn't seen each other for a long time and went to the Imperial Garden to catch up. Ling Long helped her look through the memorials in the Chang'e Palace. Li Mu looked around and found that something seemed to be missing in the hall. He thought for a while and asked, "Where's Xianxia?" In the past, when he came to the Changle Palace, Xianxia would always be leaning on a pillar in the corner, gnawing on chicken wings, duck neck, or the pork shoulder made by the imperial chef. Today, he didn't see her. There was no aura of her in the entire palace. Ling Long raised her head and said, "Something seemed to have happened at home." She went back to the Southern Sea. Southern Sea? Li Mu was surprised. She was forced to escape from the marriage. How could she run back? He continued to ask, "What happened at home?" Ling Long shook her head and said, "She didn't say anything, but she left in a hurry. There must be something urgent. For her to return to the South Sea, the matter must be very important." Li Mu took out the sound transmission Dharma artifact that Mo Li had specially made for him and activated it with his mana. After a long while, a voice came from the other side. "Lord Li." Xianxia's voice was somewhat downcast. Li Mu asked, "I heard from Ling Long that you returned to the South Sea. What happened?" Xianxia was silent for a while before she said, "It's because I've been away from home for too long. Mother misses me, so I came back to see her." She had indeed left home for a long time, so it was normal for her family to miss her. After confirming that she was fine, Li Mu didn't ask any more questions and said, "Then you should accompany your parents." At that moment, in the South Sea Dragon Palace, Xianxia put away his voice transmission Dharma artifact and lowered his head. The disappointment on his face deepened. Beside her a man sighed. "Father and mother have let you down." Xianxia shook her head and said, "It's not father and mother's fault. I was too stubborn. I should have prioritized the South Sea." After her parents left, Xianxia sat by the bed alone. She curled up her legs and buried her head between her knees. Images flashed through her mind. Sister Empress, Sister May, Sister Ali, the duck neck and chicken wings from the imperial kitchen, and the braised pork shoulder. The time she left the South Sea was the happiest time of her life. At first, when she was captured by Lord Li and became his mount, she was unwilling. Later on, she realized that there was nothing wrong with being a mount. She had food, drinks, and fun to play with. Even her cultivation had reached Realm 6 in advance, surpassing her parents. She originally thought that her beautiful life could go on like this. It wasn't until her father sent her a message that her mother was sick that she hurriedly rushed back to the South Sea from the Immortals' capital. However, when she found that her mother was safe and sound and that the Black Dragon tribe was already waiting here, she realized what had happened. It turned out that she couldn't escape in the end. The Black Dragon tribe was the most powerful tribe in the 4 seas. If she continued to resist, it would bring a huge disaster to the South Sea and even implicate her parents. She would make her parents sinners of the Green Dragon tribe. Therefore, she chose to obey. Marrying a dragon that she didn't like and had never even met was the fate of every dragon girl. Her fate had changed before, but it returned to the beginning. Xianxia lowered her head and clenched the sound transmission ritual implement in her hand. This item carried the most beautiful memory of her dragon life. It was a person that she feared, admired, and secretly admired. However, all of this would become a dusty past, sealed in her memory forever. In the Changle Palace, Li Mu didn't know what happened in the South Sea. He put away the sound transmission ritual implement and asked Exquisite, "During this time, did anything major happen in the Great Zhou?" During the time that Li Mu wasn't here, Exquisite had been helping the Empress deal with these matters. Exquisite shook her head and said, "Nothing. During this time, the people of the Great Zhou lived and worked in peace and contentment. The people's faith steadily increased. The existence of the Department of Consecration and the Department of Demons ensured that the security of the 36 counties was stable. The various decrees of the imperial court were aimed at continuously raising the living standards of the people. Today, the Great Zhou's internal troubles had disappeared and its external troubles had been quelled. It had entered a long-term period of stable development. Compared to the Great Zhou, the situation of some countries was completely different. The surrounding countries in the south were also stable. Only the Shen nation encountered some trouble. The Shen nation was located in the southwest of the Zhou continent. Its north was bordered by the Great Zhou, and its southwest was bordered by Yanzhou. Yanzhou was also a continent with a large population. Unlike the small countries in the Zhou continent that relied on the central dynasty, Yanzhou had dozens of countries. There were endless conflicts between countries. During this time, some of the countries bordering Yanzhou and the Shen nation spread the flames of war to the Shen nation. The Great Zhou court also received some news. After all, the officials of the imperial court were very aware of the danger in times of peace. The Great Zhou and the Xin nation had finally settled down with great difficulty. If the Xin nation was destroyed by Yenzhou, the southern border of the Great Zhou would be threatened again. Fortunately, the Xin nation couldn't withstand a single blow from the Great Zhou. However, in the eyes of the Xin nation, the countries of Yenzhou were all its younger brothers. The moment their borders were invaded, the Xin nation gave them a head-on blow. A large country in Yenzhou suffered tens of thousands of casualties and immediately retreated from the Xin nation's borders. This matter didn't affect the Great Zhou, so Li Mu didn't take it to heart. After discussing political matters with Exquisite for a while, the sound transmission magical artifact suddenly vibrated. It was actually AO Run calling. In order to facilitate communication, Li Mu also gave one of this magical artifacts to the Black Dragon clan. Li Mu picked up the sound transmission magical artifact. After a while he asked doubtfully, "Your Black Dragon clan wants to give me a surprise." "What surprise?" Chapter 635. Ever since he knew that Li Mu could set up the sky-stealing formation and extend people's lifespan by 60 years, Ao Feng became more attentive to Li Mu in all aspects. In the past, even when he was by Li Mu's side, he was reluctant and did not smile. Later on, he was always at Li Mu's beck and call, serving him tea, and flattering him to the best of his ability. Now, he said that he wanted to give Li Mu a surprise. He must be trying to curry favor with Li Mu again, hoping that Li Mu could extend their lifespan by 60 years. Of course, Li Mu would not extend their lifespan now. However, Li Mu planned to accept the surprise of the Black Dragon race. The dragon race was the richest race in the world. It would be a waste not to take advantage of it. Li Mu asked, "Where is the surprise?" Ao Feng said, "Where are you now?" "I will send it to you." Li Mu was in Chengdu now. However, he planned to return to Mount Baiyun to send back the spiritual jades that he had obtained from the East Sea and North Sea. Thus, he said, "Send it to Mount Baiyun first. I will be there soon." Not long after he put away the sound-transmitting instrument, the Empress walked in from outside. She looked at Exquisite and said, "Exquisite, you go out first." Exquisite looked up at her and then at Li Mu. Then she put down the booklet in her hand and ran out quickly. Zhou Yi crossed her arms and looked at Li Mu. She asked, "Don't you have anything to tell me?" Li Mu raised his hands and said, "I will tell you. That day in the East Sea, Yinxin and Tingxin expressed their feelings to me. However, I did not do anything. Instead, I returned to Chengdu to ask for your Majesty's instructions." Zhou Yi glared at him and asked, "Ask for my instructions? Ask for my instructions? If I did not agree, would you send them back to the East Sea?" Li Mu looked at Zhou Yi and said, "Your Majesty, you said last time that as long as it was written on that paper, you would not care." Zhou Yi's chest heaved. She suddenly regretted letting Li Mu write these names on that piece of paper. This had become his golden ticket to avoid death. The only thing that made her feel a little gratified was that this time, he did not act first and report later. He knew to come back and ask for her permission first. However, what made Zhou Yi angry was that Li Mu didn't act first and report later. If he really did that, Zhou Yi would have an excuse to make trouble for him. Now, she could only suppress her anger in her heart. After all, she was the one who said that she would not care about his past. A monarch's words were not a joke. As the Empress, how could she go back on her words? Zhou Yi could only comfort herself with the fact that the Tingxin sisters were also on her side. If it weren't for Tingxin, she didn't know how long it would take for her to face her own heart and confide her feelings to Li Mu. How could she burn the bridge after crossing it? She began to recall the names on the paper. Tingxin, Yinxin, Chengxin, Hulu, and Ali. Now, only Chengxin, Hulu, and Ali were left. Li would not like Li Mu. Hulu was far away in the Yao Kingdom, so she didn't care much. As for Chengxin, she had already returned to the South Sea. Even if she came back, she would be by her side and wouldn't give him a chance to take advantage of her. Zhou Yi was relieved. She glanced at Li Mu and said, "Of course I remember what I said. I also like Tingxin very much. In the future, let her accompany me in the palace." Li Mu shrugged and said, "As long as she is willing." After getting past the Empress, Li Mu breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he had the foresight. If he hadn't written Ting Xin and Yin Xin's names, he wouldn't have been able to get past the Empress so easily this time. After leaving the palace, Li Mu planned to return to Mount Baiyun to hand over the spiritual jades to the sect and see what the surprise Ao Feng mentioned was. Could it be 1,000,000 high-grade spiritual jades? Or did they find a huge spiritual jade mine at the bottom of the sea? Li Mu felt that Ao Feng had been by his side for a long time. He should know what he liked. Nothing could surprise him more than 1,000,000 spiritual jades or an entire spiritual jade mine. After all, the cultivation of the sect disciples required spiritual jades. The activation of the teleportation array required spiritual jades. The great sky-stealing array required spiritual jades. Writing talismans, refining pills, refining weapons, and setting up arrays all required spiritual jades. In the cultivation world, spiritual jades were both resources and currency. They were the foundation of a sect's rise. People of the devil path could take people's souls and essence blood without any scruples. However, cultivators of the righteous path could only use spiritual jades. Not long after, in the largest Dao palace on the main peak of Mount Baiyun, when Li Mu took out 6 small mountains of high-grade spiritual jades from the flask space, Xianxia and the others were only shocked for a moment before their expressions returned to normal. After all, it was not the first time they had seen such a scene. Fu Daozi looked away from the spiritual jades and said to Li Mu, "Disciple, come with me." He brought Li Mu to a palace and said, "Although you have been my disciple for some time, I have not taught you anything. Today, I will teach you the Void Talisman Condensation Technique." Void Talisman Condensation Technique was a mystical ability of ancient cultivators when the spirit chi of heaven and earth was still very rich. At that time, Fu Lu could be directly condensed with the spirit chi of heaven and earth. Now that the spirit chi was thin, they could only use spiritual liquid to write it in advance and use it in battle. Fu Daozi was the only exception. He had been in seclusion for several years. When he broke through to the next realm, he also comprehended the Tao of Void Talisman Condensation Technique. Moreover, he could use it in a space where the spirit chi was thin. This made his strength comparable to the experienced 7th realm like Ao Feng even though he had just broken through. However, Li Mu tried to condense a talisman in the void according to the method taught by Fu Daozi, but he did not succeed. He tried several times in a row but it was still the same. Fu Daozi was puzzled and muttered, "That's impossible. I'm not surprised that Xianxia and the others can't learn it. You are so smart, why can't you condense a Fu Lu?" Li Mu tried a few more times and shook his head. "Perhaps, I haven't fully comprehended the Fu Lu Dao." In terms of knowledge, no one in the cultivation world could compare to Li Mu. He knew how to write talismans, refine pills, refine weapons, array formations, cultivate the body, the demon Dao, the ghost Dao, the demon Dao, the Dao of dual cultivation. He could be said to be a walking encyclopedia in the cultivation world. However, except for the Dao of dual cultivation, he could not be said to be proficient in other aspects. He knew much more about the Fu Lu Dao than Fu Daozi, but Fu Daozi had been immersed in the Fu Lu Dao for 100 years in his life. He had his own understanding of the Fu Lu Dao, which was something that Li Mu could not obtain no matter how many heavenly books he read. Just like how Xiao Yu was the only one who could use the ability to curse the heavens, Li Mu, who had established his heart for the heavens and the earth, could directly control the power of the heavens and the earth. Similarly, the ability to condense talismans out of thin air was a unique ability of Talisman Daozi. From a certain point of view, this was a reward after being recognized by the heavens and the earth. Even though Li Mu had more than 10 heavenly books, he did not fully understand the operation of the heavens and the earth. For example, this kind of tailor-made magic power, the principle of the sky-stealing array, the refining method of the sun-shooting bow, and the door of the heavenly book were all mysteries to him. Since he could not learn it, Li Mu did not force it. Taking advantage of the fact that Ao Feng had not returned, he preached to the disciples of White Cloud Peak. Halfway through Li Mu's speech, 5 black dragons flew over from the distant sky. The disciples of White Cloud Mountain were already used to this. They all knew that the Black Dragon clan lived in White Cloud Mountain and seemed to have been subdued by the elders. During this period of time, they got along well with the disciples of White Cloud Mountain and had never had any conflicts. Remembering Ao Feng's surprise, Li Mu ended his preaching and went to a mountain at the back of the mountain. This was the place that Xianxia had set aside for the Black Dragon clan. Ao Feng and a few other dragons stood in front of a hall. Li Mu walked over and asked, What's the surprise you were talking about? Ao Feng pointed at a hall in front of him and gave Li Mu an extremely mysterious smile, saying, "You will know when you go in." He actually made it so mysterious. This greatly piqued Li Mu's curiosity. He impatiently released his divine sense to scan the area, but it was blocked outside the hall. Clearly, this hall was sealed by Ao Feng with a formation. This made the surprise they wanted to give Li Mu even more mysterious. Li Mu did not say much. He walked to the front of the hall and pushed the door open. He was thinking about a pile of dazzling spiritual jades, but he only saw one person in the hall. No, it was a dragon. Li Mu looked at Xianxia and said in surprise, "Xianxia, what are you doing here?" When she was taken away by the Black Dragon Clan's great elder and released from his cave, she was already in this hall. Xianxia did not know where she was and what she would face next. She was worried and scared, and her mood was extremely low. Hearing this familiar voice, she suddenly raised her head and looked at Li Mu. After being stunned for a moment, she immediately said in surprise, "Lord Li, you came to save me." Li Mu was even more stunned. "What save you? What happened to you?" Xianxia looked at Li Mu, and the endless grievances in her heart these past few days welled up. She flew into Li Mu's arms and cried, "Woo woo, they said they were going to give me to a human. I thought I would never see you again." Li Mu looked at Xianxia in a daze. In the next moment, he understood what the surprise Ao Feng was talking about was. Li Mu's face darkened. He said in a low voice, "Ao Feng, come in." There was no movement outside. His voice was blocked inside the hall. Ao Feng was actually considerate enough to soundproof this place. Li Mu slapped out a palm and the array shattered. He said, "Ao Feng, come in." As his voice rang out, Ao Feng immediately walked in. He smiled and asked, "Lord Li, how is it? Are you satisfied with this gift? This is the most beautiful dragon girl in the South Sea." Although Xianxia was beautiful, Li Mu wanted spiritual jades, not dragon girls. Li Mu glared at Ao Feng and asked, "Who do you think I am? A lecher?" This was not something obvious, but Ao Feng naturally did not dare to say so. He looked at Li Mu nervously and asked, "Is Lord Li not satisfied? Do you want me to get another one from the South Sea?" Chapter 636. Ao Feng couldn't figure out why Li Mu wasn't satisfied with the #1 beauty of the Southern Sea dragon race. She had the looks and the figure. If not, the Black Dragon race wouldn't have chosen her back then. Could it be that Li Mu liked someone with a big waist like Ao Manue? Judging from the women around him, his taste should be the same as that of the dragon race. However, Ao Feng soon noticed that something was amiss. The Southern Sea Dragoness was clinging to Li Mu's body, crying her eyes out. It didn't seem like they didn't know each other. Ao Feng was stunned and asked, You know each other?" Li Mu looked at him coldly and asked, "What do you think?" Ao Feng's face turned pale. This was truly a case of a flood rushing against the Dragon King's temple. How could they have known that Li Mu actually knew the Dragon Lady of the Southern Sea Dragon Palace? Moreover, their relationship seemed to be quite deep. After coming back to his senses, Ao Feng quickly said, I'm sorry. I didn't know you knew each other." Li Mu glared at him and said, "Go out first. I'll deal with you later." Ao Feng sighed in his heart and walked out of the hall. He wanted to give him a dragon lady to curry favor with him, but he didn't expect to make such a mistake. He was afraid that after this, his lifespan of 60 years would be further and further away from him. Xianxia was still crying on Li Mu's chest. Li Mu asked helplessly, "Why didn't you tell me that you were threatened by the Black Dragon race?" Xianxia felt wronged and said, "I didn't know that they listened to you, and I didn't know that person was you." Li Mu patted her back and comforted her. It's okay. I'll help you vent your anger when we get out." He reached out and wiped away Xianxia's tears. Her face was delicate and supple. She looked at Li Mu with a pitiful gaze. And when he looked at Xianxia, at a certain moment, Li Mu sensed that there was an aura in his body that was starting to become restless. At the same time, Xianxia's body was also a little strange. Her breathing was a little chaotic, and her face started to turn slightly red. The two of them felt as if they were hugging each other tightly, and even fusing into each other's bodies. Li Mu knew that this was the doing of the dragon marrow in their bodies. He and Xianxia had both received Ao Qing's inheritance. As long as they were close to each other, The dragon marrow in their bodies would attract each other and produce this feeling. The atmosphere in the hall suddenly became awkward and ambiguous. Li Mu already felt his mouth dry up. He let go of Xianxia and took her outside. He asked, "How do you want to deal with them?" The strength of the Black Dragon clan had been deeply imprinted in her mind since she was very young. Although she had Li Mu's support, she still shook her head and whispered, "Forget it, forget it." Li Mu looked at her and said, "I'm here, don't be afraid." At this moment, Ao Feng immediately said, "No matter what, it's our fault. Why don't the Black Dragon clan compensate her with 100,000 spiritual jades, and the Southern Sea Azure Dragon clan compensate her with another 100,000 spiritual jades?" Xianxia looked at Li Mu and nodded slightly. She said, "Okay." Li Mu didn't hold on to the Black Dragon clan. After all, Ao Feng did this to curry favor with him. Although the method was a bit clumsy, if he didn't let this matter go, it would be difficult for the Black Dragon clan to do anything for him in the future. Li Mu's face darkened. He said, "Don't act on your own in the future. If there's a next time, don't expect me to help you extend your lifespan." Li Mu's words meant that there was still hope. Ao Feng was overjoyed. He quickly said, No, if you like someone in the future, just tell us directly. This way, there won't be any mistakes." Ao Feng and the others might have misunderstood him. Li Mu explained, "I won't let you rob anyone. Just don't act on your own in the future." Ao Feng nodded. He looked at Xianxia and asked Li Mu, "Then should we send her back to the Southern Sea?" Li Mu waved his hand and said, "No need. I'll bring her back to the divine capital later." Ao Feng left gloomily. He was happy to join Li Mu, but he didn't expect to lose 100,000 spiritual jades in the end. Who would have thought that other than the Empress of the Great Zhou, the Queen of Demons, and the Master of the Ghost Region, he also had an ambiguous relationship with the Dragon Lady from the Southern Sea. Ao Feng even suspected that he was the reincarnation of the Black Dragon clan. No, even the Dragon King Ao Qing from 8,000 years ago was inferior to him. Li Mu flew out of the Black Dragon clan's mountain. Xianxia followed Li Mu and asked, "What should I do now?" Li Mu said, "You can return to the divine capital like before and continue to follow the Empress. If you want to go back to the Southern Sea, you can also go back." Although the time limit was not up yet, after being together for so long, no one used her as a mount anymore. Xianxia shook her head decisively and said, "I'm not going back." Li Mu said, "Then you can come back to the divine capital with me." He thought that the surprise Ao Feng gave him was an endless supply of spiritual jades. He didn't expect that he would give Xianxia as a gift. Li Mu came here for nothing, so he could only take her back. In the palace, Zhou Yi saw Xianxia and Li Mu appear together. She was stunned for a moment and asked suspiciously, "Why did you come back together?" Li Mu saw her expression and knew what she was thinking. He immediately explained, "Your Majesty, don't misunderstand. It's a long story. I'll explain it to you slowly." Li Mu first met Xianxia in the Shen Kingdom because she didn't want to marry the Black Dragon clan. She secretly escaped from the Southern Sea, but unexpectedly fell into the hands of the Shen Kingdom people. In the end, she met Li Mu. This time, in order to please Li Mu, Ao Feng and the others forced the Southern Sea Dragon clan to hand Xianxia over. The Southern Sea Dragon clan used her mother's illness as an excuse to trick her back to the Southern Sea and handed her over to Ao Feng and the others. Then, Ao Feng brought her back to the White Cloud Mountain and prepared to give her to Li Mu as a gift. After going around in circles, she returned to the divine capital. Li Mu sipped his tea and said, "That's what happened. I thought they would give me hundreds of thousands of spiritual jades. Who knew it was Xianxia?" Zhou glanced at him and said, "This shows that your image in the Black Dragon clan is like this. You should reflect on yourself. Why did they give you Xianxia and not something else? How could Li Mu know the Dragon clan's way of thinking?" Ao Feng's mistake was ultimately his fault. Unfortunately, Li Mu couldn't reason with the Empress. After sending Xianxia to the Imperial Palace, he returned home. Xianxia was temporarily living in the Imperial Palace, while Xin was living in the Li Mansion. When Li Mu returned home, she was playing shuttlecock with Wan Wan and Xiao Bai. Although the three of them were young, their cultivation was in the 5th realm. If they wanted to, they could make the shuttlecock never fall to the ground. Li Mu didn't know why they could play so happily. However, Watching their graceful bodies flying up and down was also a kind of enjoyment. Li Mu looked at them for a while. Among the three women, Yin Xin was the strongest, followed by Wan Wan. Xiao Bai, who had stepped into the door of cultivation earlier than Wan Wan, had the lowest cultivation. This was not because Wan Wan was more talented than her, but because Xiao Bai, as a member of the Heavenly Fox clan, had not resolved the knot in her heart and had not settled the karma. Even if she used elixirs, she could not step into the next realm. Li Mu looked at Xiao Bai with a tender expression on his face. She was the most sensible and obedient. She never caused trouble for Li Mu. She had always suppressed the hatred for her grandmother and her clan deep in her heart and never revealed it easily. She was always thinking about the hatred of her clan's extermination, but she always showed a smile in front of everyone. In the past, Xuanzong was a giant in the eyes of Li Mu and her. But not anymore. He could mobilize the experts of the Great Zhou, the Yao Kingdom, the Ghost Realm, the Yong Kingdom, the 5 Taoist sects, the 4 Buddhist sects, and the Black Dragon clan. Even if Xuanzong had an expert of the 8th realm, he could not protect Xuanzong's disciple. Fu Daozi once wanted to fight Xuanzong, but Li Mu refused. He wanted to wait until he had the strength to fight against an 8th realm expert. Then, he would fight Xuanzong on behalf of the Fu Lu school. But when Li Mu saw Xiao Bai smiling like a flower, he changed his mind at this moment. He did not want to wait any longer. Li Mu smiled and waved to Xiao Bai saying, "Xiao Bai, come here." Xiao Bai threw down the shuttlecock and quickly ran to his side. She asked with a smile, "Benefactor, what's the matter?" Li Mu patted her head and said, "Let's go. I'll take you to revenge." Chapter 637. Although Xuanzong only had 5 7th realms, Li Mu had to be fully prepared because of Tianjizi's existence. He didn't go there to start a war with Xuanzong, but to force them to hand over Qingqingzi so that Xiao Bai could take revenge. In the past, Li Mu didn't have the strength to make Xuanzong give in. Now, Xuanzong didn't have the power to make Xuanzong give in. Other than Xiao Bai, he was the first to tell the Empress about this. Zhou Yi didn't think too much and said, "I'll go with you." Li Mu shook his head and said, "With your Majesty's identity, it's not appropriate for you to show yourself in public. I can handle this matter." In the entire Zhu continent, or even the 10 continents, she was the most distinguished person. How could the monarch of a country leave the capital to fight? Zhou Yi frowned. After a while she said, "Then I'll let the 4 principals go with you." Li Mu continued to shake his head and said, "The 4 principals represent the Great Zhou. This is a personal matter between Xuanzong and me. The imperial court shouldn't interfere. Moreover, they have the responsibility of guarding Shen, Du and can't leave." Zhou Yi thought for a while and said unhappily, "You don't want me to help you. Are you going to find that fox and your ghost sister?" Li Mu didn't comment. The Great Zhou was a human country, and the central imperial court of the Zhu continent was orthodox. Everything the imperial court did had to follow etiquette. However, the Yao country and the Ghost Realm were different. They had always been barbaric and violent. Naturally, they didn't have so many concerns. Looking at the Empress who was obviously jealous, Li Mu held her hand and comforted her. "This time, we're condemning Xuanzong. It's improper for the Empress of a country to follow. Next time if there's a chance like this, I'll definitely bring you." The Empress had a childish temper. She was only dissatisfied that Li Mu had asked for help from Phantom Princess and Su He, leaving her behind. Li Mu comforted her for a while, and she felt better. After settling the matter with the Empress, Li Mu looked at Linglong, who was busying herself at the table, and said, "Linglong, you haven't returned home in a long time. You can accompany me to the state of Yong." Princess Linglong had learned many ways to govern a country from the heavenly tomes. As the Yong kingdom was too small, it did not give her too much space to display her skills. It was only during this period of time in the Great Zhou that she was able to display all her skills, even forgetting the time. Only after Li Mu reminded her did she realize that she had not returned for a long time. For a moment, her heart was filled with thoughts of her hometown and family. She immediately stood up and said, Okay. Li Mu did not delay. After leaving the palace, he brought Linglong and Xiao Bai to the state of Yong. In the Yong Imperial Palace, he and the Yong Emperor had a private discussion. Not long after, the Yong Emperor personally escorted him and Xiao Bai out of the Imperial Palace, saying, Rest assured, Lord Li. I will definitely be there when the time comes. Li Mu cupped his hands and said, "Many thanks, Your Imperial Majesty." The young emperor smiled and returned the greeting, saying, "What are you saying, Lord Li? You have done a great favor for the state of Yong. This is also an opportunity for us to repay your kindness." After leaving the state of Yong, Li Mu went to the state of Liang, the state of Yu, the state of Jiang, and the state of Jing, respectively visiting the Danding sect, the Ling Formation sect, the Southern sect, and the Northern sect. When he left the Northern sect master and the two grand elders looked at each other and sighed. If Xuanzong had known this would happen, why did he do it in the first place? Only one of the grand elders was puzzled, muttering, "Martial Uncle Tianji's divination skills are unparalleled in the world. He can even predict the future for a short period of time. Could it be that he didn't predict that Xuanzong would have this day?" The other grand elder shook his head and said, "The mysteries of heaven are hard to predict. Who can completely predict them? Those who scheme against the mysteries of heaven will eventually be schemed against by the mysteries of heaven. I don't know if Xuanzong will regret his original decision when the time comes." After leaving the Northern sect, Li Mu took Xiaobai to the Buddhist sect's heart sect. He reminisced with Xuandu for 2 hours, then had a secret discussion with the venerable of the heart sect for 15 minutes before leaving the heart sect. Over the years, he had made use of the heavenly tomes to form many relationships. It was now time to use them. He didn't plan on fighting with Xuanzong. He wanted to avoid internal strife among the righteous path before officially clashing with the demonic path. He could only use strength to crush Xuanzong and force him to submit without expending a single soldier. After contacting the Taoist sects, only the 3 Buddhist sects of the Shen kingdom remained. When Li Mu and Xiaobai passed by the Shen kingdom, they could clearly feel that this kingdom was very different from the last time they visited. The Shen kingdom had a new ruler. Under Zhou Zhong's promotion, reforms were carried out from the bottom up. The legal system established was on the verge of perfection. If the Yong and Great Zhou were a combination of the rule of law and the rule of man, then the Shen kingdom was a pure rule of law. There was no distinction between close and distant, no distinction between high and low. Everything was decided by the law. In the Shen kingdom, Zhou Zhong pushed legalism's ideology to the extreme. In troubled times, severe punishments were used. When the heads of the Shen kingdom's criminals were piled up several zhang high outside the execution ground, the crime rate within the kingdom plummeted. In a very short period of time, everyone became fair and law-abiding citizens. Li Mu's destination was the Shen kingdom's new capital. On the Zhou continent, this kingdom's strength was once second only to the Great Zhou. Now, the one controlling it behind the scenes was actually a former minister of the Great Zhou. The Shen kingdom's court officials had also undergone a change of blood. They were led by Wei Peng and transferred over from the Great Zhou by Li Mu. The closer they got to the new capital, the more Li Mu could sense the changes in the Shen kingdom. Flying over the new capital, Li Mu's expression changed slightly. He could sense an abnormally powerful aura from below. This aura was so powerful that even he felt some fear. Obviously, there was a 7th realm expert in the Shen kingdom's new capital who was no weaker than him. Li Mu quickly locked onto this aura. Then, he was pleasantly surprised. He held Xiaobai's hand and landed in the Shen kingdom's palace. They walked straight into a palace. In the palace, a middle-aged man sat cross-legged. He opened his eyes and looked at Li Mu. He said, "Lord Li, long time no see." Li Mu smiled and said, "Long time no see. Congratulations on your advancement, Lord Zhou." Zhou Zhong smiled and said, "Congratulations to you too." There was more than one way to advance to the 7th realm. For example, Li Mu and the Empress advanced by refining the Emperor Qi. After advancing, their strength was stronger than those who advanced through the sex inheritance. However, people like Zhou Zhong and Fu Daozi did not accept the sex inheritance and did not refine the Emperor Qi. Only those who advanced through their own strength could be considered true 7th realm experts. Their strength was incomparable to others. The school of legalism blazed a new path and was actually very powerful. The current Zhou Zhong was probably even stronger than Fu Daozi. After a brief moment of catching up, Li Mu went straight to the point and said, "I plan to go to the Xian sect to seek justice for Little White. Originally, I was here to invite the venerables of the 3 sections. Since Lord Zhou has also advanced, why don't we go to the Xian sect together? The scenery in the East Sea is much better than here." Without a doubt, Zhou Zhong, who had just advanced to the 7th realm of legalism, was grabbed by Li Mu just like that. As for the three supremacies of the Shen Kingdom's Buddhist sect, Nirvana sect, Ku sect, and Yen sect, their soul blood was still in Li Mu's hands. After receiving the message, they immediately came to the Shen Kingdom's imperial palace and expressed their obedience to Li Mu's arrangements. The Yong Kingdom, the other 4 Taoist sects, and the 4 Buddhist sects were Li Mu's allies. Li Mu was also the first to visit. The Ghost Realm and the Yao Kingdom were Li Mu's backyard. Gathering the experts of these two places was just a matter of a word from Li Mu. After leaving the Shen Kingdom, he and Xiaobai first went to the Ghost Realm, which was the closest to them. Compared to last time, Fengdu City had undergone great changes. Suhi was using the power of the ghosts to enter seclusion and break through to the next realm. Within Fengdu City, the ghosts were gathered in a huge plaza. A stone tablet stood in the center of the plaza. The telekinesis in their bodies was attracted by the stone tablet and sank into it. Compared to the Great Zhou and the Yao Kingdom, Su He, as the Ghost Lord, had the strongest control over her territory. With the heavenly tomes in hand, all the cultivators of the Ghost Realm had absolute submission to her. In this aspect, even the Empress and Phantom Princess couldn't compare to her. Su He and Su Miao were both in seclusion. During this period of time, she was at a critical juncture in breaking through to the 7th realm. Li Mu didn't disturb her and went straight to the Ghost Servant. The Ghost Realm's current strength was stronger than the Yao Kingdom's. The 4 Ghost Kings, the 3 elders of Yu and Ming, as well as the Ghost Servant who could directly contend with Xian Ming, were the peak experts on the surface. Even the Great Zhou couldn't compare to them. Devil King and the others naturally obeyed Li Mu's orders. The 3 elders of Yu and Ming also had no other choice. After discussing the time with the Ghost Servant, Li Mu didn't delay and went to the Yao Kingdom without stopping. In Fengdu City, the 3 elders of Yu and Ming had strange expressions. Buyer sighed with emotion. I didn't expect that one day, we would actually be able to fight Xuanzong. It's like a dream. For more than 1,000 years, Xuanzong of the Dao sect had always been the demon sect's #1 enemy. If it weren't for Xuanzong, they probably would have destroyed the 6 Dao sects long ago and seized the heavenly tomes of the 6 sects. When the 3 of them were still working for the demon sect, one of their ultimate goals was to fight Xuanzong. They didn't expect that they would be able to do what they couldn't do in the demon sect here. It had to be said that fate made fools of them. Those people in Xuanzong probably didn't expect that the first to attack their sect wasn't from the demon sect. Not long after, in the Thousand Fox Nation, Li Mu and Xiaobai had just landed in the square in front of the palace when Xiaobai ran toward the 2 figures in front of her. She happily said, "Sister Huanji, Sister Hulu." Ever since coming to the Thousand Fox Nation, Xiaobai's mood had obviously improved a lot. The entire city was filled with the aura of her race. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was her heaven. Huanji and Hulu also doted on her very much. After hearing Li Mu's intentions, Huanji held Xiaobai's hand and said, "Damn that Xuanzong, bullying our family Xiaobai like this. Sister will take you to take revenge." Li Mu asked, "Are you going too?" Huanji rolled her eyes and said, "Of course, this is our fox race's matter. How can I not go?" Li Mu didn't dissuade her like he dissuaded the Empress. After all, she was from the monster race and didn't have as many rules as the human race. After Huanji finished speaking, she thought of something and asked Li Mu, "Is Zhou going?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "Not going. Then I have to go even more." Huanji lightly snorted, then patted Xiaobai's head and said, "Xiaobai, now you should know who treats you better." Chapter 638. Phantom Princess was a big fox spirit, and Xiaobai was a little fox spirit. They were both foxes and were naturally easy to get close to. For Xiaobai, who had always been by Li Mu's side and had never met anyone of the same race after she grew up, the Thousand Fox Nation, which was full of fox spirits, was undoubtedly her paradise. After summoning the Blue Wolf King, 9 Heaven Snake King, and Tian Shan Bear King, the 4 Demon Kings gathered and discussed the plan with them. Li Mu looked at Xiaobai, who had never smiled like this before. He walked over and patted her head, saying, "Why don't you stay with Sister Phantom Princess first and meet us later?" Xiaobai grabbed Li Mu's wrist tightly without thinking and said, "I'll stay with my savior." Seeing Li Mu and Xiaobai disappear into the horizon, Hu Jiu retracted the reluctance in her eyes. Then she realized something and asked Hu Lu in a low voice, "What do you think is so special about him that we like him so much?" Hu Lu looked at her and shook her head, saying, "Unfortunately, he only likes 2 foxes." Sigh. Sigh. After sighing, Hu Lu looked at Hu Jiu and asked, "What are you sighing about?" Hu Jiu looked at her and asked, "What are you sighing about?" After leaving the Yao nation, Li Mu returned to White Cloud Mountain. He had informed Xianxia earlier. At this moment, all the 7th realm cultivators of the Talisman Puppet sect had already gathered at the sect. Ao Feng had also received the news long ago. He rubbed his palms together in front of Li Mu and asked, "Do you want me to call the dragons of the other 3 seas over as well?" Li Mu glanced at him and asked, "Will they listen to you?" Ao Feng puffed out his chest and said, "As long as I say the word, they will definitely come." To be honest, the Black Dragon clan didn't have the authority to do so. Although the Silver Dragon, White Dragon, and Azure Dragon clan weren't as strong as them, they wouldn't listen to their orders. However, even if they didn't give them face, they had to give face to Shou Yuan. He had already made a blunder once. Of course, he had to do everything he could to make up for it and change Li Mu's impression of them. Although the other 3 dragons had some conflicts with Li Mu and had lost a lot of spiritual jades to him, who would go against their lifespan? Ao Feng immediately ordered the other 3 elders to immediately head to the South Sea, North Sea, and East Sea to gather the dragon tribes of the 4 seas in response to Li Mu's plan. After arranging everything, Li Mu stood at the highest peak of Mount Baiyun and gazed towards the east. The mountain breeze caused his clothes to flutter. Xiao Bai was nestled beside him. The setting sun gilded their silhouettes, forming a beautiful picture. At the same time, far away on the shore of the East Sea, Tianjizi, who was sitting cross-legged in a deathly silent space, slowly opened his eyes. The expression on his face was as calm as ever as he softly said, "They're finally here. East Sea. Penglai Archipelago." It was said that there were 10 continents and 3 islands in the world. Everyone in the 10 continents knew that the 3 islands were illusory. One was called Fengzhong, one was called Kunlun, and one was called Penglai. They were all legendary immortal mountains. It was said that if one could find these 3 immortal islands, one would be able to peek into the secrets of longevity. The Penglai Archipelago wasn't the legendary immortal island. It was just that Xuanzong had named their sect with the same name. However, due to Xuanzong's reputation as the #1 sect of Taoism, the Penglai Archipelago had also been the holy land of cultivation in the hearts of the cultivators of the Zhu continent for the past 1,000 years. However, that was in the past. In the past year, Xuanzong's status and influence had taken a turn for the worse. The Great Zhou didn't allow them to establish their Dao arenas. The Demon Country and the Ghost Domain didn't allow Xuanzong's disciples to enter. The other 5 sects of the Orthodox Taoism no longer had any dealings with Xuanzong. In the past half a year, almost no news about Xuanzong had appeared in the cultivation world. Due to the difficulty of moving around outside, Xuanzong's disciples didn't go out anymore. Instead, most of them cultivated in seclusion within the sect. They would often think of the scene during the Taoism exchange meet. That was also the turning point of Xuanzong's fortune. If the sect had acted impartially back then, they definitely wouldn't have fallen to such a state today. This time, Xuanzong's disciples were still cultivating in the sect as usual. In the Dao Palace on the upside-down mountain peak at the highest level, Dao Chengzi, who had half white hair and half black hair, was sitting on a huge spiritual jade chair as he listened to the elders' reports. Because the Great Zhou didn't allow us to establish our Dao arenas, nor did they allow us to recruit disciples. Last month, there were less than 5 new disciples. The Ghost Domain didn't allow us to enter, and the Demon Country didn't do business with Xuanzong. In the past 3 months, our disciples didn't have any soul power to cultivate, and the spiritual herbs were almost used up. We can't continue like this. Without new disciples and without cultivation resources, Xuanzong will definitely fall in a few years. Dao Chengzi's face darkened as he listened to the elders' reports. Coupled with his half-black and half-white hair, he looked very strange. In the past, Xuanzong never had to worry about talented disciples. Xuanzong's Dao arenas were all over the Zhu continent. Regardless of whether they were disciples of cultivation families or itinerant cultivators, they all fought tooth and nail to become Xuanzong's disciples. Every month, Xuanzong rejected at least 800 people, if not 1,000. Now, They couldn't even recruit disciples. Xuanzong was located on the shore of the East Sea. They needed to recruit disciples from the Great Zhou and obtain resources from the Ghost Domain and the Demon Country. Because of Li Mu, these three sects had directly cut off all ties with Xuanzong, making them a completely isolated sect. If this continued, Xuanzong would definitely fall at an extremely fast speed. Just as Xuanzong's elders were frowning and finding it difficult to speak, the gloomy Dao Qingzi suddenly raised his head. With a shocked expression, he flew out of the Dao Palace. A moment later, the other three 7th Realm cultivators seemed to have sensed something and flew out with Dao Qingzi. Far away in the sky, streaks of rainbows were shooting towards the direction of the Xian sect. Each streak of light exuded an extremely powerful aura. Seeing this, a chief's expression changed drastically. He said in fear, "Oh no, the demon sect is attacking." Dao Chengzi's pupils constricted. He said in a low voice, "No, it's not the demon sect." As the streaks of light got closer, someone finally saw what was happening inside the streaks of light. The fear on their faces gradually turned into shock and confusion. In the lead were more than 10 figures in Taoist robes. Apart from Xuanzong, they were the sect masters, grand elders, and 7th realm cultivators of the 5 sections. Behind the 5 sects cultivators were 4 old monks standing on lotus platforms. Their bodies glowed faintly with golden light, and they also exuded 7th realm auras. Beside the 4 monks were 3 figures in imperial robes. They were also 7th realm cultivators. On the other side, 5 powerful demonic auras shot into the sky. Then, 7 figures appeared in a cloud of ghostly fog. However, this was not the most shocking thing. More than 10 black, green, silver, and white dragons circled above the crowd. The aura of each dragon gave Xuanzong's cultivators an extreme sense of oppression. That was a 7th realm dragon. More than 10 7th realm cultivators descended on Xuanzong. At this moment, the seawater surged, and the sky changed color. A terrifying aura enveloped them. Even though Xuanzong's sect-protecting array was activated immediately, the Xuanzong cultivators in the array formation still felt a sense of suffocation. Especially when they saw the young man and woman at the front of the crowd, their expressions changed. Dao Chengzi clenched his teeth and squeezed out 2 words. "Li Mu." Li Mu's expression was calm. He said calmly, "Dao Qingzi, we meet again." The simple "we meet again" sounded extremely complicated in the ears of the Xuanzong cultivators. The last time they met, he was just a mere 5th realm disciple of Fulu school. Although he had a high status, he was so insignificant in front of Xuanzong. Even if he bullied him wantonly, Fulu school could only swallow it. In just 2 years, Xuanzong's status plummeted. The next time they met, the 5th realm cultivator was already a 7th realm cultivator. He brought dozens of 7th realm cultivators from the 5 Taoist sects, the 4 Buddhist sects, the Demon Nation, the Ghost Realm, and the Dragon Race to Xuanzong with an indomitable attitude. The current Li Mu and Xuanzong were just like Xuanzong and Li Mu in the past. It was karma and retribution. The Xuanzong disciples had also walked out of their cave abodes. They looked at the figures in the sky with dazed expressions. What happened? Aren't those the seniors of the other 5 sects? What are they doing in Xuanzong? Oh my God, so many cultivators. They're Buddhists, demons, ghosts, and even the dragon race. What happened? Among the crowd, Qingzi, who had already finished his confinement, looked up at Li Mu and the girl beside him. His face instantly turned pale. Even with his 5th realm cultivation, he couldn't support his body and fell to the ground powerlessly. Dao Qingzi's face was also pale. Although Li Mu only greeted him casually, how could he not know the purpose of his trip to Xuanzong? 2 years ago, Xuanzong used his power to bully others and covered for Qingzi. After causing a ruckus at Fulu school, he left with his tail between his legs. 2 years later, the Xuanzong was also the one being bullied and humiliated. But now, the Xuanzong was the one being bullied. Among the dozens of cultivators, including Li Mu, there were several whose cultivation was unfathomable. Not to mention the dragon race, even if all the cultivators of Xuanzong worked together, it would still be like throwing eggs at a rock. A trace of regret finally appeared on the white-haired half of Dao Qingzi's face, but the black half of his face became even more ferocious. He said sternly, "Other than the demon sect, you're the first one to lead people to attack Xuanzong in the past 1,000 years. Elixir Cauldron sect, Spiritual Array sect, South Sect and North Sect. Do you know what you're doing? Do you want to kill your fellow disciples? Although his face was ferocious, anyone could see that Dao Chengzi was a bit cowardly at heart. After all, even if there were only half of the cultivators present today, they could still raze Xuanzong to the ground. Xuanzong's history of bullying others was gone forever. Li Mu looked at Dao Chengzi and said calmly, "Our sect has no intention of killing our fellow disciples. We're only here to seek justice. Are you going to hand over Qing Chengzi, or should I go and take him myself?" It was the same request as 2 years ago, but Xuanzong could no longer treat it the same way as 2 years ago. Beside Dao Chengzi, another Grand Elder and several first seats were silent for a moment before speaking one after another. "Senior brother, hand over Qing Chengzi." "That's right, Martial Uncle. This is our fault. Don't continue to make mistakes." "Martial Uncle, isn't it enough that the sect has become like this?" Not only did the cultivators of Xuanzong try to persuade them, but the disciples of the sect also had the same idea. Xuanzong was in the wrong, and the powerful sect in the past had fallen to its current state. It was reaping what it had sown. Qing Chengzi stood in the crowd and looked at the disdainful and hateful gazes of his fellow disciples. He only felt a chill run down his spine. He gathered all his spiritual power and wanted to escape, but a figure suddenly appeared beside him. It was Xuanzong's sect master, Miao Yunzi. "Sect master. Sect master is back. Sect master, please don't leave again. Xuanzong needs you." Seeing their former sect master, Xuanzong's disciples were all excited. Qing Chengzi trembled and said in a trembling voice, "Sect master." Miao Yunzi looked at him and sighed. "You have to learn to bear the consequences of your own mistakes." He waved his sleeve and disappeared with Qing Chengzi. When they reappeared, they were already outside the array formation. Dao Chengzi's expression changed. "Miao Yunzi, what are you doing?" Miao Yunzi took out a token and said, "Martial Uncle has ordered that Qing Chengzi has violated the sect rules and is now expelled from Xuanzong. From now on, he will have nothing to do with Xuanzong." With that, he disappeared, leaving only Qing Chengzi outside. Li Mu reached out and grabbed Qing Chengzi to his side. After sealing his spiritual power, Li Mu looked in the direction of Xuanzong. Although the result was inevitable, the process went so smoothly that it was beyond his expectations. 2 years ago, Tianjizi's attitude was still very firm. 2 years later, he actually handed over Qing Chengzi. The contrast between before and after made Li Mu feel very confused. In order to absolutely crush the mysterious sect, he had brought almost all the forces he could mobilize to the mysterious sect. He had even brought a long-distance teleportation array with him. This was to prevent the Devil Dao from taking advantage of the situation, and they would not be able to provide support in time. Li Mu had never really experienced the strength of an 8th realm cultivator. If Tianjizi wholeheartedly protected Qing Chengzi, he was even prepared to face a Dao integration realm cultivator. Now, he felt like he had been preparing for a long time and finally hit cotton. There was an indescribable discomfort in his heart. At this moment in the silent space, Miao Yunzi said in shock, "In just 2 years, he has actually grown to such a level. He has gathered all the powerful cultivators of the entire Zhu continent around him. Even the dragon tribe of the 4 seas is under his command. Martial Uncle, you have already predicted all of this. Did you already know that he would unite all these forces?" Tianjizi shook his head and said, "The will of the heavens is hard to predict. No one can predict everything. I only know that if we don't force him, when the calamity comes, the beings of the 10 continents won't have any power to resist. In this endless situation of death, he is the only chance of survival." Miao Yunzi murmured, "Taoism, Buddhists, the dragon tribe of the 4 seas, the demon nation, the ghost realm. All these forces have formed an alliance. Even the demonic Dao will have to retreat. What kind of catastrophe is it that requires everyone to unite to resist?" Tianjizi continued to shake his head. "The catastrophe is unpredictable. No one can predict it. But I have a hunch that that day will come soon." Chapter 639. Above the East Sea, the powerhouses of various forces stood in the air. Qing Chengzi had been handed over to Li Mu by Miao Yunzi, and Tianjizi had not appeared from the beginning to the end. Li Mu had made many preparations in advance, but they were useless. In Xuanzong, the elders and disciples also heaved a sigh of relief. At the most critical moment, the sect had pulled back from the brink. They had not made a mistake until the end. There were so many powerhouses outside, and they were enough to wipe out the demon path. How could Xuanzong deal with them? Only Dao Chengzi's face was filled with black and white qi. His hair turned completely white one moment, and then completely black the next. His aura also fluctuated between strong and weak, and it became extremely unstable. Seeing this, a first seat's expression changed drastically, and he exclaimed, "Oh no, Martial Uncle has turned into a demon." The path of cultivation was filled with all kinds of difficulties and dangers. Most cultivators would also encounter inner demons. At this moment, Dao Qingzi's appearance was clearly a sign of an inner demon's invasion. Back then, it was he who had protected Qing Qingzi and saved Xuanzong's face for a while, but it caused the sect to sink deeper into a quagmire, unable to extricate itself. Although he had never mentioned it, it must have become a sharp thorn in his heart. Now Li Mu had led many powerhouses to force Xuanzong, and the sect master had ordered the sect master to hand over Qing Qingzi. This was undoubtedly a heavy blow to him, and it completely shattered his dignity. How could Grand Elder Dao Qingzi, who valued his face so much, tolerate this so easily? In the blink of an eye, Dao Qingzi's hair turned completely black. It seemed that time had reversed on his body, and his aura also rose to a very terrifying level. When Li Mu first fought with Dao Chengzi, his cultivation was only an ordinary 7th realm cultivator, which was similar to the sect masters and grand elders of the various sections. Just now, when he saw Dao Chengzi with half black and half white hair for the second time, his aura was comparable to Ao Feng's. When his hair turned completely black, the violent aura emitted from Dao Chengzi's body had surpassed Ao Feng's, even surpassing Fu Daozi's and Zhou Zhong's, and was close to Xian Ming's. Clearly, he had already been possessed by the devil. 2 years ago, Li Mu had wreaked havoc in Xuanzong. He had defeated Dao Chengzi, a 7th-level cultivator, in front of all the cultivators in the world. 2 years later, Li Mu was already a 7th-level cultivator. He had led all the cultivators to force Xuanzong with overwhelming strength and completely destroyed Dao Chengzi's Taoist heart. To put it simply, he had a mental breakdown. The consequence of his Dao heart collapsing was that his body was now completely under the control of his inner demon. Dao Qingzi's body floated in the air. His hair was disheveled and fluttered in the wind. His body exuded an evil aura that was completely different from that of the orthodox Xianmen sect. He looked like a devil. Even Yu Ming's 3 elders, who came from the devil Dao, shuddered at the sight of Dao Chengzi. The grand elder of Xuanzong, the Taoist priest Qingzi, had completely lost his mind. His eyes were bloodshot, but his expression was calm. He looked at Li Mu without any ripples and said indifferently, "Junior, do you dare to fight with this old man again?" In front of the crowd, the ghost servant looked at Dao Chengzi with surprise. For cultivators, inner demons were a disaster, but it was also a good fortune. Most people who were invaded by inner demons would lose their minds and become monsters that only knew how to kill. However, there were also a few who could control inner demons and increase their strength greatly. Dao Chengzi was neither the former nor the latter. At this moment, his second consciousness, which was the inner demon, had taken control of his body. However, this inner demon didn't only know how to kill. Like Dao Chengzi, it had a deep obsession. Defeat Li Mu. Li Mu looked at Dao Chengzi, who seemed to have become a different person. He exuded an extreme pressure, and the battle intent in his heart surged wildly. The grudge between Fulu School and Xuanzong seemed to be between Xiao Bai and Qing Chengzi, but it was actually between him and Dao Chengzi. No matter who won or lost in today's battle, the grudge between them would be completely resolved. A powerful aura also surged out of his body. He laughed and said, "Why wouldn't I dare?" Under the gaze of all the cultivators, as well as all the disciples and elders of Xuanzong, 2 streaks of light flew out from the crowd. They collided violently, and each retreated hundreds of feet. Li Mu's body was as strong as a dragon's, while Dao Chengzi formed a shield around him. This was a probing move, but neither of them had the upper hand. In the next moment, Dao Chengzi opened his mouth. A white light flew out of his body and quickly turned into a silver flying sword. The flying sword transformed into thousands of sword shadows behind him. They arranged themselves into a huge fan shape and then shot toward Li Mu. At the same time, Countless streaks of blue light appeared behind Li Mu. Thousands of spear shadows flew out. In the void between the two, the spear shadows and sword shadows collided. Black cracks spread out like a spider web. What a powerful spell! Even space can't withstand it. Is this a battle between seventh realms? The disciples of Xuanzong were shocked, but there was also a hint of excitement in their eyes. Compared to this battle, their usual battles were no different from children playing house. They didn't realize that many of the seventh realm cultivators present couldn't hide the shock in their hearts when they saw the space shatter. This wasn't a battle between seventh realms. Which seventh realm cultivator here could shatter the void? The short battle between Li Mu and Dao Qingzi made them realize that even though they were all in the seventh realm, the gap between them could be so huge. Among the people present, perhaps only little White and Huan Ji's eyes were twinkling like little stars. In the sky, it was impossible to see the silhouettes of these two people. Only the light of spells could be seen flashing. The Xian house was famous for its variety of spells. However, in terms of the number of spells that the house knew, Li Mu did not lose out to the supreme elder of the house. In this short battle, he had broadened everyone's horizons. In this extremely short period of time, Li Mu had already realized that the demonized Dao Chengzi's Dharma power was no weaker than his. Furthermore, the number of Dharma spells and divine powers that Dao Chengzi knew was also the greatest among all the opponents that Li Mu had encountered. The two of them countered each other's moves with various divine powers. Of course, if Li Mu took out the sun shooting bow, Dao Chengzi wouldn't be his opponent. However, the sun shooting bow was like a bug in the 10 continents. It could kill people of the same level instantly. Li Mu couldn't afford to cheat in front of so many people, and Phantom Princess and Xiao Bai were watching. Dao Chengzi wouldn't accept it either. Moreover, this was a fair battle. He didn't know how to cheat, nor did he need to. Li Mu reached out, and a green light flashed in his hand. He held Heaven Breaking in his hand and chose to fight in close combat. Spells were his strong suit, and also Dao Chengzi's strong suit. The winner couldn't be decided in a short time. Li Mu disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already behind Dao Chengzi. The tip of his spear stabbed toward Dao Chengzi's back with lightning speed. Dao Chengzi's back was facing Li Mu. His body swayed inexplicably, and Li Mu's spear missed. He shook the spear, and several spear shadows appeared in the void and stabbed toward Dao Chengzi at the same time. Dao Chengzi's body swayed again, and several afterimages appeared, dodging Li Mu's every attack. He slowly turned around and casually dodged Li Mu's close-range attacks. He said in a low voice, "I started cultivating when I was 5, refined my soul when I was 6, condensed my soul when I was 7, and condensed my soul when I was 8. I entered the divine power realm when I was 10, the creation realm when I was 20, the Dongxian realm when I was 40, and the transcendence realm when I was 80. I've cultivated for 100 years. How can I lose?" His words were powerful, but everyone could hear the unwillingness in them. Almost all the seventh realm cultivators present could feel the unwillingness. To be able to cultivate to this level, they were all geniuses among geniuses, who didn't have arrogance higher than the sky. However, Dao Chengzi's arrogance was completely destroyed in front of a junior who was more than 100 years younger than him. With his seventh realm cultivation, he was forced to retreat pathetically when he faced Li Mu, who was at the fifth realm. Now Li Mu had completely caught up to him, and he was completely humiliated in front of all the disciples of his sect. He desperately needed a victory. Only by defeating Li Mu could he eliminate the obsession and unwillingness in his heart. Dao Chengzi's words almost pierced the hearts of most of the cultivators present. They looked at the young figure who gave them endless pressure, and their feelings were slightly complicated. Especially the 3 elders of Yu and Ming, the 4 Ghost Kings, the Green Wolf King, and the supremacies of the 3 Buddhist sects of the Xin nation, who had been defeated by Li Mu. At this moment, they even hoped that Dao Chengzi would win. Dao Chengzi was already the limit of their generation of cultivators. If even he was defeated by Li Mu, it meant that their generation had been surpassed by the younger generation. Their hundreds of years of hard work couldn't compare to a few years of casual cultivation. Huan Ji looked up and saw that the Heaven Lord of Illusion's gaze was a little strange. She snorted and asked, "Father, who do you want to win?" The Heaven Lord of Illusions immediately retracted his gaze and looked at Huan Ji. He smiled and said, "What are you asking?" "Of course I want my son-in-law to win." In the void above, The spear radiance shone brightly. Every spear that Li Mu stabbed didn't even touch the corner of Dao Chengzi's clothes. It was as if Dao Chengzi already knew where the spear would land before he stabbed. This was foresight. Seventh realm cultivators already had the ability to foresee. However, in order to foresee the attacks of cultivators of the same level, one had to cultivate the art of divination to the peak. This was what Xuanzong cultivators were good at. If they could foresee the future one step ahead of their opponents, they would naturally be in an invincible position. Unfortunately, his opponent was Li Mu. Foreseeing the future was a mystique and also a Dao technique. It could only be used by borrowing the power of heaven and earth. Through cultivating the Jianghu 4 sentences, he already had the ability to directly control the power of heaven and earth. As long as their cultivation wasn't too much higher than his, they wouldn't be able to borrow the power of heaven and earth. Li Mu was the master of this world. If he didn't lend the power of heaven and earth, Dao Qingzi wouldn't be able to use a single Dao technique. Li Mu calmly stabbed his spear. A trace of confusion appeared on Dao Chengzi's face. The afterimages around him disappeared. A spear pierced through his shoulder and through his entire body. If the owner of the spear wanted to, the spear could pierce through his throat, heart, dantian, or any other part of his body. He looked down at the spear that pierced through his shoulder and then slowly looked up at Li Mu. He said in a low voice, "Domain. You've already comprehended a domain. No one below the Dao integration stage can defeat you. I've lost." After saying this, his hair quickly turned from black to white. His aura also instantly fell. In the end, he was only at the transcendent initial stage. Sigh, Ao Feng sighed. Then, he realized something and murmured, "He won. Why am I sighing?" He didn't know why he wasn't happy about Li Mu's victory over Dao Chengzi. However, in order to make a good impression, Ao Feng still pretended to be happy. He said loudly, "Lord Li's powers are boundless. Old fogies of Xuanzong, is there anyone else who's not happy?" The outcome of the battle between Li Mu and Dao Chengzi had been decided. The dozens of powerful beings present didn't feel any joy from the victory. Instead, they all sighed in their hearts. Dao Chengzi's defeat represented the end of an era. The era that belonged to them had come to an end. And a new era was slowly rising. Li Mu pulled out the sky-splitting spear, turned around, and left. He didn't look back. He threw Qing Changzi back into the flask heaven dimension. He held Xiao Bai in one hand and Huan Ji in the other and disappeared from everyone's sight. The powerful beings also left. Xuanzong. Qing Xuanzi's face was pale. After a long while, he withdrew his gaze from the void. He recalled his conflict with Li Mu, and a wry smile appeared on his face. At this moment, the hatred in his heart toward Li Mu suddenly disappeared without a trace. With their current identities, status and strength, he couldn't and didn't dare to hate him anymore. That figure holding the spear was deeply engraved in Qing Xuanzi's heart. It was also engraved in the hearts of all Xuanzong disciples. They would never be able to forget it. Chapter 640. Yangqiu County. In the northwest direction of the county, there were a few hills in the lush mountains. These were the tombs of Xiao Bai's grandmother and her clansmen. When they left Yangqiu County, Li Mu and Xiao Bai buried them with their own hands. Xiao Bai knelt in front of the tombs with tears in her eyes. She sobbed and said, "Grandma, big sister Yingying, big sister Yan Yan, Xiao Bai has avenged you." Qing Chengzi's body was lying in front of the tombs. He had committed suicide. After being abandoned by Xuanzong, he knew that he would not have a good ending, so he dispersed his soul. Li Mu flicked his finger and a fireball landed on his body. The flames rose instantly and were extinguished in an instant. A gust of wind blew, and everything returned to dust. The grudges between Xiao Bai and Qing Chengzi, as well as the grudges between Li Mu and Xuanzong, were resolved. Li Mu stayed here with Xiao Bai for a few hours before returning to his ancestral home in Yangqiu County. The place that was once extremely familiar to him was now completely different. The shops on the street had changed several times, and the roads that he used to patrol had become unfamiliar. It was no longer the Yangqiu County that Li Mu was familiar with. The sky was already bright. Li Mu looked at Xiao Bai, who was still sleeping soundly beside him, and a smile appeared on his face. 6 snow-white fluffy tails were hanging by the bed. She had taken her revenge, and the only thing that bothered her was put down. Last night, she had silently advanced in her sleep. Xiao Bai's talent was not bad. Under Li Mu's nourishment, she had never lacked any cultivation resources. The medicinal power in her body had accumulated, and her dermic powers were far superior to ordinary dermic powers. She should have advanced to the 6th realm like Lu Hanyan and Li Qing, but because of the unresolved knot in her heart, her cultivation had stagnated for a long time. The knot in Xiao Bai's heart had been untied, and Li Mu had also put down a huge burden in his heart. To treat the #1 sect in the world as an enemy required a great deal of courage. In order to be able to speak with Xuanzong on an equal footing one day, Li Mu had made countless efforts in the past 2 years. He had already returned the humiliation of that day in double. From now on, he and Xuanzong would mind their own business. He would go his own way, and they would go their own way. The glory of Xuanzong is a thing of the past. In the near future, Fu Lu School will replace it. In the coming days, Li Mu needed to focus all of his attention on the demonic path. During this time, although the demonic path had been quiet, Li Mu could already feel the calm before the storm. When the demonic path ancestors gathered together, the calamity of the righteous path would also arrive. Deep in the South Sea, Ghost Island. Aside from the people of the demon sect, no one knew the location of Ghost Island. It was not that the island was remote, but that the location of Ghost Island was not fixed. To be exact, it was a floating island floating in the South Sea. For hundreds and thousands of years, it had been wandering aimlessly. Only through the mutual sensing between the tokens of the demonic path could the location of the island be found. Xianming sat up in his sarcophagus on the tower in the center of the island. He lowered his voice and said, "Buddha, Taoism, monster, ghost, dragon tribe. For thousands of years, no one has ever united them. Even Ao Qing couldn't do it. What's so special about him?" The third ancestor slowly said, "In the past 10,000 years, he is indeed the biggest anomaly we have encountered." Xianming said regretfully, "Unfortunately, he did not flatten Xuanzong. This will save us a lot of trouble in the future." The third ancestor said, "He is a smart man, but Tianjizi is not that simple. Li Mu has united many forces. The situation in the Zhu continent is no longer under our control. Order all disciples to stop all actions and wait for the right opportunity." One order after another silently spread out from Ghost Island. Shendu. Ever since Li Mu brought everyone to Xuanzong for a stroll, the entire Zhu continent seemed to have settled down. Earlier, there were still traces of the demonic path in the various counties and southern countries of the Great Zhou. Overnight, they seemed to have evaporated into thin air, disappearing without a trace. Without a doubt, the forces gathered by Li Mu this time had intimidated the demonic path. Although the demonic path's 3 ancestors and Xianming were on Ghost Island, the number of core experts was far less than what Li Mu had gathered that day. After realizing the difference in strength, they did not dare to be too active on the continent. In the entire Zhu continent, the only place that was not so peaceful was the Xin nation. The conflicts between the tribes in Yanzhou were getting more and more intense. The flames of war spread to the borders of the Xin nation, resulting in a lot of bloodshed and even deaths. Although the Xin nation had sent troops to suppress the conflicts would not subside in a short time. Li Mu had been diligently cultivating in Shendu these days. The existence of the first and second ancestors of the demonic path made him uneasy. After the dual cultivation, Lu Hanyan and Li Qing were exhausted and fell asleep. Li Mu was still full of energy. His body was comparable to that of the dragon clan. He could only return to his study, take out 2 pieces of top-grade spiritual jade, and cultivate with them in his hands. Creak. At a certain moment, the study's door suddenly opened and then slowly closed. 2 figures slipped into the room. Li Mu opened his eyes and asked, "Why aren't you sleeping? What are you doing here?" Xiao Bai blushed and said, "I want to sleep with benefactor." Wan Wan continued, "I want to sleep with Xiao Bai." Xiao Bai wanted to sleep with Li Mu, and Wan Wan wanted to sleep with Xiao Bai. However, when they slept, they lay on either side of Li Mu. Li Mu originally wanted to cultivate all night, but now he could only sleep with them. Li Mu could not sleep well with the fragrance of girls on both sides. It was all because of that damned Ao Qing's inheritance that his resistance to beauty was greatly reduced. If he didn't recite the clear heart art, even little by Wan Wan couldn't resist his willpower. Li Mu restrained the impulse in his heart. After an unknown period of time, Xiao Bai's voice sounded in his ear. Benefactor. Xiao Bai leaned close to Li Mu's ear and whispered, Benefactor, I want to tell you something. Li Mu asked, What is it? Xiao Bai lowered her voice and said softly, Sister Wan Wan and I are no longer children. It was unknown if the fox race was born to do this, but after saying this, the usually innocent and cute Xiao Bai actually stuck out her small tongue and licked Li Mu's earlobe. At the same time on the other side, Wan Wan's body also leaned over. In the past month, Li Mu had roughly experienced Ao Qing's happiness. Ever since Wan Wan and Xiao Bai, Ting Xian, who had never been obedient, sneaked into his room one night. That night, Li Mu learned for the first time how clingy the snake demon was. And one night, when Ting Xian encountered a bottleneck in his cultivation and came to ask Li Mu for advice on cultivation problems, she happened to bump into Ting Xian, who had sneaked into Li Mu's room. The double happiness became double happiness. Finally his body, which was as strong as a dragon's, could not take it anymore. The Tao of dual cultivation also had to be controlled. Cultivating without restrictions would instead be counterproductive. Li Mu planned to rest for a few days and return to White Cloud Mountain to see the progress of his disciples' cultivation. The spirit jades plundered from the Four Seas dragon race made Fulu School the richest sect in the cultivation world. Even if the 5 Taoist sects and the 3 Buddhist sects were added together, they were still far from White Cloud Mountain spirit jades. This was because the Four Seas dragon race was just too rich. In the smaller continents, the resources were divided among countless factions and sections. There was not much left in each person's hands. However, the largest ocean was the dragon race's territory. There were only 100 or so dragon race members in the Four Seas. They monopolized the ocean's resources. Ordinary people could not imagine how deep their foundation was. The various sects did not lack geniuses, but their resources were extremely limited. The sect had 2 powerhouses at the peak of the Blessed Realm, but there was only one portion of resources that could allow a 5th realm cultivator to enter the 6th realm. This was the most important reason that limited the number of powerhouses in each sect. The problem Fulu School was facing now was that the sect had 2 powerhouses at the peak of the Blessed Realm, but there were 10 portions of resources that could allow a 5th realm cultivator to enter the 6th realm. The disciples who could not obtain too many resources in the past did not need to fight for them. Everyone had a share. This caused the disciples who broke through to the next realm to spring up like bamboo shoots after a rain in the past month. Although 7th realm powerhouses were not made from spirit jades, there were few elders who were stuck at the peak of the Blessed Realm who broke through with the help of spirit jades. The number of 6th realm powerhouses in Fulu School quickly increased to 11. This number was still a little lacking compared to the current Xuanzong. However, Fulu School had already surpassed Xuanzong in terms of the number of 7th realm powerhouses. With almost endless resources, it was only a matter of time before the sect's core strength surpassed Xuanzong's. However, spirit jades could increase the sect's overall strength, but they could not increase the sect's peak combat strength. Breaking through to the 7th realm either relied on legacies or Emperor Qi. There were shortcuts. However, how could one break through to the 8th realm? Fulu School once had a 9th realm powerhouse, but at that time, the spiritual Qi of heaven and earth was not as thin as it was today. One could reach the 9th realm through normal cultivation. The same method could no longer be used today. In today's world, the only ones who knew about the cultivation method of the 8th realm were probably Xuanzong and the demonic path. However, it was clear that neither Xuanzong nor the demonic path would reveal it to Li Mu. In order to face the danger that could come at any time, Li Mu stayed at White Cloud Mountain for 3 days before heading to the Yao Nation to discuss the Tao of dual cultivation with Huan Ji. At the same time, in Yanzhou, on a vast plain, 2 large tribes were fighting fiercely. Tens of thousands of soldiers had died on the battlefield. The entire plain was covered in mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The land that stretched as far as the eye could see was dyed dark red by blood. Under the plain, 10,000 feet deep, a sinister man sat cross-legged. Streaks of baleful qi were attracted from the battlefield above and entered his body. The more intense the battle above was, the more baleful qi flowed into the ground. It gradually formed a black cocoon that enveloped the sinister man. Jianghu continent. Jianghu continent was located overseas, far away from the other continents. It did not have much interaction with the other continents. Unlike the divided Zhu continent, Jianghu continent had hundreds of millions of people, but only one unified country, the Ying nation. A few months ago, a sudden plague swept through the Ying kingdom. Hundreds of thousands of people had already died from the plague, and the number was still increasing. The cultivators of the Ying continent had tried to save them, but no matter if it was pills or talismans, none of them had any effect on the plague. More and more people died in their homes, on the streets, and everywhere else. The air above Jianghu continent was filled with a thick baleful qi. Even if cultivators encountered it, they would avoid it. No one knew that at the center of this deathly aura, there was a gray figure floating in the air. His eyes had no pupils and were completely gray. An ancient book page floated above his head, and the deathly aura in the distance was attracted by the book page and slowly gathered towards this place. Chapter 641. Ghost Realm. Fengdu City. Li Mu and Illusion Princess floated in the air. The three elders of Yu and Ming, the four ghost kings, and the ghost servant stood behind them, looking at a huge fog vortex in the city. Li Mu and Illusion Princess were cultivating in the Demon Nation when they suddenly received a message from the ghost servant that something strange had happened in Fengdu City. He immediately rushed to the ghost realm with Illusion Princess. In Fengdu City, the fog vortex gathered all the Yin Qi within 1,000 miles and sucked it into the vortex. Under the huge fog vortex, a powerful aura was brewing. It wasn't the first time Li Mu felt this aura, so he naturally knew what it meant. With the combined efforts of the entire ghost realm, Suhi was taking the crucial step. Soon, the Empress of the Great Zhou, the Queen of 10,000 Demons, and the Master of the Ghost Realm would all become 7th Realm experts. Li Mu and the others waited for several hours. In the fog vortex, Suhi's aura finally reached a peak. Then it broke through a certain barrier. The vortex gradually dissipated, and a figure walked out. At this moment, the four ghost kings and Feng Yi, who only had a soul body, suddenly felt a sense of fear from the depths of their hearts. Facing the figure that walked out, they couldn't suppress the desire to submit in their hearts. They couldn't help but bow, and even their heads were lowered. In Fengdu City, countless ghost cultivators had the same feeling. They all knelt on the ground and kowtowed in a certain direction. Outside Fengdu City, the wandering ghosts all stopped in their tracks. Then, they lined up in neat rows and slowly floated towards Fengdu City. The ghost servant knelt on one knee and said respectfully, "Congratulations, Ghost Lord." When the four ghost kings and by one saw this, they knelt down as well. Although by two and by three weren't ghost cultivators and didn't cultivate ghost Dao techniques, they were too embarrassed to remain standing when everyone had knelt down. They could only kneel down and say respectfully, "Congratulations, Ghost Lord." Suhi's voice was gentle as she said, "Rise." Then, she slowly walked in front of Li Mu and looked at Illusion Princess. Illusion Princess also puffed out her chest and looked back at her, not to be outdone. Suhi was the first to speak. "I've often heard him mention it. Now that I've seen it with my own eyes, the Queen of the 10,000 Demons is indeed charming." For some reason, although Illusion Princess didn't like Zhou Yi, she didn't reject the girl in front of her. She smiled and said, "Ghost Lord sister, you're too kind. You're also very beautiful." Suhi bowed to her and said softly, "Suhi." Huanji also returned the greeting and smiled, "Huanji." Seeing the two of them complimenting each other and introducing themselves, Li Mu was momentarily stunned. Phantom Princess and the Empress were like fire and water. They were always at loggerheads with each other. However, she and Suhi got along very well. This was out of Li Mu's expectations. Originally, this time, if she didn't insist on coming, Li Mu planned to go to the ghost realm alone. With her by his side, he felt uneasy. Only now did he feel relieved. Each of them had a noble status and millions of people under them. If they were all like Illusion Princess and the Empress, Li Mu would be stuck in the middle. Who knew how uncomfortable it would be? After Suhi advanced, countless wandering souls began to gather outside Fengdu City. Those were the wandering souls of the ghost realm welcoming their king. At first, they were just low-level wandering souls. Gradually, 5th and 6th level wandering souls began to appear. Among the group of wandering souls, there were existences whose auras weren't weaker than the 7th level. The ghost realm was a treasure trove that hadn't been fully explored yet. Only when she advanced to the 7th level could she completely control this treasure trove. In the next few days, Li Mu accompanied Suhi and traveled through the entire ghost realm. The corpses of giant beasts that had been dead for tens of thousands of years in the ghost realm were the nests of wandering souls. The strongest wandering souls existed there. In 5 days, Li Mu and Su He found more than 10 7th-level wandering souls. Su He subdued all of them. It was also in these few days that Li Mu and Su He noticed some clues. In the ghost realm, the number of souls suddenly increased dramatically. Moreover, they were all Yin spirits that had just died. As the master of the ghost realm, Su He was the clearest about the situation in the ghost realm. Wandering souls didn't have intelligence. Ghost cultivators also had the characteristics of ghost cultivators. The number of these two wouldn't change too much in a short time. If the number of Yin spirits in a place increased dramatically in a short time, there was only one possibility. That place had many people who died in a short time. And those Yin spirits couldn't all come to the ghost realm. Therefore, the true number of people who died in the places where these Yin spirits were was far more than this number. The two of them traced back to the source and finally found the source of these Yin spirits. Yanzhou. The conflict at the border of the Xin nation let Li Mu know that Yanzhou wasn't peaceful recently. However, after personal investigation, he found out that the entire Yanzhou had completely turned into a battlefield. This was a large-scale war. Almost all the tribes and nations in Yanzhou participated in it. Millions of Yanzhou people died in the war. The souls of the dead even drifted to the ghost realm. Before the Great Zhou was founded, the situation in Zhou province was also like this. It wasn't until Emperor Taizu founded the Great Zhou that the Zhou continent was unified. During the reigns of Emperor Wu, Emperor Wan, and the Empress, the Great Zhou was cleared of internal and external troubles. Only then did the Zhou continent achieve its current stability. If it weren't for this, the Zhou continent would be no different from Yanzhou now. Although Li Mu couldn't stand the sight of corpses lying everywhere, this situation wasn't something that could be changed by one person or one nation. The only thing he could do was to protect the Zhou continent, protect the Yao nation, and protect the ghost realm. He didn't want them to follow in Yanzhou's footsteps. After figuring out the source of the Yin spirits, Li Mu and Su He left hand in hand. As they were leaving, he vaguely felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. He turned around to take a look, but still found nothing. Su He noticed Li Mu's strange behavior and asked, "What's wrong?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "Nothing. Let's go." However, just as they were about to return to the ghost realm, Li Mu suddenly turned back. At that moment, he finally realized what was wrong. Evil spirit. Wherever Li Mu and Su He went, there was no trace of evil spirit in the various battlefields in Yanzhou. This was extremely illogical. Battlefields were places of great evil. Evil spirit gathered here. Without external interference, it wouldn't dissipate even after hundreds of years. But in the various battlefields in Yanzhou, millions of people died, and there wasn't even a trace of evil spirit. There was only one possibility. The evil spirit in all the battlefields in Yanzhou had been taken away by someone. Li Mu had once sneaked into the Ghost Island and knew the cultivation methods of the demonic cultivators. In addition to the soul and blood essence of humans, evil spirit, death spirit, and so on were also one of their cultivation methods. Those who cultivated these paths often liked to use ancient battlefields or ancient tombs as cultivation places. These places were full of evil spirit and death spirit, which was the most suitable for them to cultivate. Soon, Li Mu realized something. The inexplicable intercontinental war in Yanzhou, the deaths of millions of people, and the disappearance of the evil spirit. Combined with these things, an answer was on the verge of being revealed. Someone instigated an intercontinental war in Yanzhou and used the evil spirit piled up by millions of people to cultivate. To need so much evil spirit, this person's cultivation was definitely not Dongxian. At the very least, he was at the peak of the transcendence realm like Xianming. He wanted to use this to break through to the 8th realm. And Yanzhou was the location of another headquarters of the demonic cultivators. Only the demonic cultivators could do such a thing. Li Mu had once wondered how the first and second ancestors of the demonic cultivators would advance to the 8th realm. But he couldn't think of an answer because he underestimated the demonic cultivators' bottom line. In order to break through, they sacrificed millions of innocent lives. They had no bottom line at all. More importantly, by the time Li Mu discovered it, it was already too late. The person behind the scenes had already gathered enough evil spirit. It was only a matter of time before he broke through, and it definitely wouldn't take too long. When that time came, how should he deal with it? Compared to the demonic cultivators, the righteous cultivators he could ally with had an advantage in number of 7th realm cultivators. They had no problem dealing with one of the 3 ancestors of the demonic cultivators. However, if there was another 8th realm cultivator, they would definitely be defeated. If there were 2 more 8th realm cultivators, even the Taoist and Buddhist sects, the Yao Kingdom, the Ghost Realm, and the Great Zhou would have no chance of winning. Li Mu could predict that if Yanzhou was like this, the situation in Jianghu state shouldn't be any better. Looking at the devastated land of Yanzhou, Li Mu's heart began to sink. Chapter 642. Returning to the Ghost Realm with Su He, Li Mu had a lot on his mind. He had pondered over the matter of Yanzhou for a long time. He informed everyone that from now on, they had to be extremely vigilant. They didn't need to worry about spirit jades, and they had to be prepared to use the ultra-long-distance transmission array at any time. The demonic path's relative strength was at its peak in the last 10,000 years. Once they took action, they would be unstoppable. As for himself, he had to personally go to the Jianghu continent to investigate. That was the last headquarters of the demonic path. If the demonic path had set up their headquarters in Yanzhou for this purpose, then the Jianghu continent would have already become a purgatory on Earth. With the Earth-shrinking technique, Li Mu could travel through the 10 continents and 3 islands in a day. From the Ghost Realm to the Jianghu continent, crossing the West Sea would only take a few hours. The demonic path spies were everywhere. If Li Mu left with great fanfare, he would not be able to hide it from them. This trip to the Jianghu continent was a secret investigation. In order to avoid alerting the enemy, Li Mu didn't bring anyone. He quietly left the Ghost Realm alone and headed west from the West Sea. When he arrived at the Jianghu continent, what Li Mu saw was a plague that had swept through the entire continent. Countless people died in the plague. The Jianghu continent's only large country, the Ying country, did nothing, allowing its people to be swallowed up by the plague. Li Mu knew that the Ying country had long been controlled by the demonic path. Including the royal family, all the officials in the court were part of the demonic path. This was the result they wanted to see. In the Jianghu continent, Li Mu also discovered something unusual. In the first city he came to, the number of people who died was in the tens of thousands. But in the entire city, there wasn't much death energy. The small amount of death energy was slowly rising, floating towards the sky. Under normal circumstances, death energy would gather in low-lying areas, affecting the soil there, causing it to become barren and gradually become a place to raise corpses. The death energy didn't fall but instead rose. There must be something strange about it. Li Mu hid his figure and followed the death energy slowly rising, moving in a certain direction. Along the way, Li Mu had already discovered that death chi was rising from all over the cave-gathering continent, converging in the same direction. Until 2 hours later, a huge cloud of death chi appeared in front of Li Mu's eyes. In the entire Jianghu continent, hundreds of thousands of people who had died from the epidemic had gathered their death chi here, causing the originally formless death chi to become corporeal. Li Mu's eyes flashed with a golden light. His gaze pierced through the clouds of death chi, and he saw a gray-robed figure sitting cross-legged in the clouds. This person was currently absorbing the death chi in the clouds, and above his head was a simple and unadorned page. It was obvious that the death chi in the gathering cave continent was attracted by this page. Heavenly Book. When he saw the page, Li Mu was shocked. At this moment, the gray-clothed man in the death aura seemed to have sensed something. He suddenly opened his eyes and turned to look in Li Mu's direction. There were no pupils in his eyes, only a gray-white color. His entire person was filled with a strange feeling. In the next moment, the gray-clothed man's figure vanished from the clouds. When he reappeared, he was 1,000 feet away from Li Mu. He stared at Li Mu with his gray-white eyes, and shock appeared in his eyes as he said, "It's you." Li Mu wasn't curious that this person would recognize him. To possess a heavenly book and have such a cultivation, he must be a top powerhouse of the demonic path. He might even be one of the first or second ancestors. As the gray-clothed man's voice fell, he turned into a beam of light and fled into the distance. This person's understanding of Li Mu was clearly deeper than Li Mu had expected. He and the demonic path were originally like fire and water, and both of them wanted to obtain the other's heavenly book. If the demonic path ancestors saw Li Mu, They would do everything in their power to capture him. So how could they flee without fighting? The only possibility was that this person knew that he was no match for Li Mu. With the sun-shooting bow in hand, Li Mu was invincible below the 8th realm. As long as this person hadn't reached the 8th realm, he didn't have the strength to contend with Li Mu. He was clearly aware of this point, so he didn't linger in the battle. Instead, he chose to flee. But how could Li Mu let him do as he wished? This person's identity was likely to be one of the demonic path ancestors, and one that hadn't advanced yet. If Lin Ming didn't take advantage of this opportunity to deal with him, there would be even greater trouble in the future. The sun-shooting bow instantly appeared in Li Mu's hand. Li Mu immediately shot out an arrow that contained 10% of his magic power. Although the sun-shooting bow was the most powerful when shooting out an arrow at full strength, unless Li Mu had the confidence to kill this person with a single arrow, he had to be extremely careful when shooting. First, he would use a less powerful arrow to exhaust himself, and at the same time quickly restore his cultivation. This way, he would have a decent endurance and wouldn't fall into a state of emptiness after shooting out an arrow, becoming a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Swish! With Li Mu's current cultivation, even an arrow that only contained 10% of his magic power directly pierced through space, creating a spatial crack. It arrived behind the gray-robed person in the blink of an eye. This arrow was enough to kill a regular 7th-level cultivator. Just as the arrow was about to pierce through the back of the dark-robed person's heart, he suddenly turned around and punched out. Boom! His fist was wrapped in a deathly aura. When it collided with the arrow, the gray-robed person flew back 1,000 feet. However, the arrow directly collapsed into specks of light and vanished into the surroundings. The gray-robed person was unharmed after shattering the arrow from the sun-shooting bow with a single punch. The gray-robed person clearly realized something. He looked at Li Mu from several thousand feet away and pursed his lips. He said, "What? You don't dare to use your full strength?" Even Xian Ming would have been injured if he received Li Mu's arrow, but it didn't cause any harm to the gray-robed person. His cultivation was much stronger than Xian Ming's. He was probably only a step away from the 8th level. Li Mu looked at him and asked, "Which ancestor of the demonic way are you?" The gray-robed person smiled faintly and said, "You can call me second ancestor, or you can call me Yuan Luo." Li Mu had seen Yuan Luo's name in Ao Qing's diary. He was Ao Qing's old rival from 8,000 years ago. Before Ao Qing's lifespan ended, they still couldn't determine a victor. As expected, he was one of the 2 ancestors of the demonic way that Li Mu had never met. Yuan Luo's cultivation had already reached this level. Once he completely refined the deathly aura, he would definitely step into the way integration stage. Together with the first ancestor of the demonic way, the demonic way would be invincible. Li Mu couldn't just watch this happen. Against such an opponent, it was useless to waste his energy. He put away the sun-shooting bow and a long spear appeared in his hand. The gray-robed person looked at the long spear in Li Mu's hand and sighed. "Ao Qing, you have indeed been an unforgettable opponent for me over the past 10,000 years. 8,000 years ago, the 2 of us couldn't determine a victor. I hope you won't disappoint me when we fight again today." As soon as he said that, a long gray spear condensed in his hand. Li Mu gripped the heaven-breaking spear tightly and said coldly, "You won't be disappointed." As soon as he said that, he and Yuan Luo disappeared and reappeared at the same time. Clang! The tips of the spears collided with an ear-piercing sound. A black spot suddenly appeared where the tips of the spears met before spreading into countless black lines. The space there shattered like a mirror. The 2 of them tacitly didn't choose to fight with their abilities. At their level of cultivation, even the most ordinary move would have the power to destroy heaven and earth after being entwined with the power of heaven and earth. In the void, the 2 of them were difficult to capture. The only thing that could be seen was the intertwining green and gray light and the shattering of space. Clang! The green and gray light collided once again. Yuan Luo was sent flying hundreds of meters away. An abnormal red color appeared on his face as he forcefully swallowed a mouthful of blood essence that was about to spit out. A trace of doubt appeared on his face before he disappeared again. Clang! After another attack, Yuan Luo was sent flying hundreds of meters away again. He looked at Li Mu, who was still standing on the same spot. The doubt on his face finally turned into shock. Something wasn't right. His true cultivation was higher than this person's. In such a head-on clash, he should have the absolute upper hand. But why was he the one who was injured every time he was sent flying? Even if this person had battle experience that wasn't inferior to his, there shouldn't be a situation where he was suppressed despite his higher cultivation. After thinking about it, Yuan Luo finally realized the reason. Every time their artifacts collided, Li Mu's spear would be entwined with the power of heaven and earth. However, the power of heaven and earth entwined around his spear would always strangely disappear when it got close to Li Mu. This was equivalent to using his powers to fight against the power of heaven and earth. How could he possibly have the upper hand? Yuan Luo was an old monster with 10,000 years of experience. In an instant, he figured out the problem. He said in shock, "Domain! You're only at the 7th level. How can you control the power of a domain?" Even with his 10,000 years of experience, he couldn't hide the shock in his heart when he realized this. The power of a domain could only be controlled after one's cultivation reached the 8th level. Controlling the power of heaven and earth was the biggest difference between the 7th level and the 8th level, as well as between the Transcendence realm and the Unification path. In his 10,000 years of experience, Yuan Luo had never seen anyone who could control the power of a domain at the 7th level. His 10,000 years of common sense had been shattered by Li Mu today. Li Mu controlled the power of a domain. Before Yuan Luo's cultivation reached the 8th level, it was impossible for him to defeat Li Mu. No one at the 7th level could defeat Li Mu either. In a battle of techniques with the same cultivation level, Li Mu was in an invincible position right from the start. After realizing this, Yuan Luo didn't want to continue fighting and immediately teleported away. How could Li Mu let him go? He took a step forward and used ground shrink. When he appeared again, he was already in front of Yuan Luo. However, at this moment, Yuan Luo suddenly raised his head, and a strange smile appeared on his face. This smile caused Li Mu to feel a chill in his heart. At this moment, Li Mu suddenly sensed that the power of space in a city in front of him had started to become extremely active. Li Mu wasn't unfamiliar with this situation. This was the appearance of an ultra-long-distance teleportation formation when it was activated. A pillar of light appeared in the center of the city. The next moment, a figure walked out of the pillar of light. It was an old man who looked like a skeleton. There didn't seem to be any flesh on his body. It was like a piece of dried human skin stuck to his bones. There were no eyes in his eye sockets, only 2 balls of ghostly fire flickering. When those 2 balls of ghostly fire looked in Li Mu's direction, Li Mu's body suddenly turned cold. It was as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Chapter 643. After the violent spatial fluctuations, the skeletal old man that appeared gave Li Mu an extremely dangerous feeling. At this moment, Li Mu recalled the first time he met Tian Jizi. Without a doubt, this skeletal old man was an 8th-level powerhouse. His identity was on the verge of being revealed. The demonic path's 3rd patriarch, Yu Quan. Yuan Luo looked at Li Mu and smiled wickedly. "Do you think you're the only one who knows how to teleport?" Before he could finish his sentence, Li Mu's figure had already faded and disappeared on the spot. If it was only Yuan Luo, he could still deal with him. The demonic path's 3rd patriarch, Yu Quan, was a true 8th-level powerhouse. Even if Li Mu shot an arrow with all his strength, he would not be his match. The gap between the 6th level and the 7th level could be crossed with the help of the sun-shooting bow. However, when he encountered the 8th-level Yu Quan, the 7th level, he had no other choice but to run. After using spatial contraction once, he flew towards the east at full speed. As long as he reached the West Sea, he would be like a dragon entering the water. Even Yu Quan would not be able to catch up to him. However, Li Mu soon felt a powerful aura rapidly approaching from behind. Although the demonic path's 3rd patriarch was not as fast as spatial contraction, he was still much faster than Li Mu at full speed. He quickly caught up. However, when the distance between the two was close to 10,000 feet, Li Mu took a step forward and disappeared again. Yu Quan chased after him unhurriedly without any expression on his face. It was as if Li Mu was already in his hands. Hundreds of miles ahead, Li Mu continued to run for his life. After using spatial contraction twice, the magic power in his body was almost depleted. He could only fly while reciting incantations and using spiritual jades to replenish his magic power. He did not expect to meet the demonic path's 2nd patriarch in the Gathering Cave continent, Nor did he expect there to be a long-distance teleportation formation that connected to the Ghost Island. They did not hesitate to spend a huge amount of spiritual jades to teleport Yu Quan over. They used the method that Li Mu had invented on Li Mu. At present, Li Mu was still unable to contend against such an expert without risking his life. Even if he and Yu Quan fought with their lives on the line and both sides were heavily injured, there was still Yuan Luo by his side. At that time, Li Mu would definitely be an arrow at the end of its flight and would definitely not be a match for Yuan Luo at his peak. No matter what, leaving that place was definitely the best choice. He used all of his magic power to increase his speed. In front of him, he could already see a blue sea. In 2 more breaths of time, Li Mu would be able to enter the Western Sea. At that time, even the 3 ancestors of the demonic path would be powerless. However, when he was only a short distance away from the sea, a black lotus suddenly appeared on the shore in front of him. The evil Dao's 3rd ancestor Yu Quan stood on the black lotus and calmly stared at Li Mu. Since Xianxia is not here, where else can you run to today? With his path blocked, Li Mu did not panic. Instead, he gradually calmed down. Yu Quan's words raised doubts in his heart. He looked at Yu Quan and asked, "What Xianxia?" Yu Quan looked at Li Mu indifferently and said, "If it wasn't for Xianxia stopping me time and time again, do you think you would still be alive today?" Li Mu was shocked. He had no idea what Yu Quan was talking about. He only knew that the evil Dao's 3rd ancestor was an expert of the 8th level who could lead the demonic path to sweep through many sects on the Zhu continent. However, he had always been holed up in the South Sea Ghost Island and would not easily set foot on the Zhu continent because of a certain reason. He did not know that it was Xianxia who had always been stopping Yu Quan. According to Yu Quan, he once wanted to personally attack Li Mu but was stopped by Xianxia. What was Xianxia's purpose for doing so? What was certain was that at that time, Li Mu and Xuanzong were like fire and water. Xuanzong's decision to cover for Qingqingzi was also made by Xianxia. Why did he want to protect Li Mu? In the past 2 years, Xuanzong had suffered countless losses at the hands of Li Mu and had long lost his position as the #1 sect of the righteous Dao. Not long ago, he led a group of experts to attack Xuanzong. Right now, it was not important to figure out the reason for all this. What was important was how to escape from Yu Quan. The West Sea was not far ahead, but with Yu Quan blocking the way, this seemingly short distance was impossible to cross. At such a distance, Li Mu did not even have time to use Earth Shrink. The flames in Yu Quan's eyes kept flickering as he looked at Li Mu, trying to see if there was any panic or despair on his face. However, the result was somewhat disappointing. Li Mu's expression was indifferent, and no emotions could be seen. The flames in his eyes flickered as he asked, "You're not afraid?" Li Mu asked back, "Why should I be afraid?" Yu Quan's face revealed a strange expression as he said, "You still have a trump card. I'm very curious, where does your confidence come from? Is it Ao Xian's Sun Shooting Bow?" The Sun Shooting Bow was one of Li Mu's greatest trump cards. During Ao Xian's era, many 8th level experts had fallen under the Sun Shooting Bow. This bow was completely capable of killing Yu Quan. However, the premise was that Li Mu had Ao Xian's cultivation at that time. With his current cultivation, he could not kill or even seriously injure Yu Quan with the Sun Shooting Bow. However, his ultimate trump card had never been the Sun Shooting Bow. It was just that Li Mu would not use that trump card unless he was truly in a desperate situation. The stronger his magic power, the greater the backlash from using that trump card. When Li Mu was in the lower and middle realms, he could still barely withstand it. However, now that his cultivation had reached the 7th level, the terrifying backlash was enough to destroy Li Mu's body and soul on the spot. When he tried to let the Empress possess him, even the Empress was frightened. The Empress's cultivation at that time was about the same as Li Mu's now. Finally, Yu Quan seemed to have run out of patience and said, "Hand over the heavenly book and join the sage sect. Then we can let bygones be bygones. Xianxia is not here, so you won't be as lucky as before." "Oh, how did you know that I'm not here today?" Just as Yu Quan's voice fell, an old voice suddenly came from the shore behind him. This voice sounded familiar to Li Mu, and in Yu Quan's heart, it was unforgettable. He suddenly turned his head and looked at a reef by the sea. On one of the reefs, an old man was sitting cross-legged. The old man's back was facing Li Mu and Yu Quan, and he was holding a fishing rod in his hand. It was unknown how long he had been sitting there. Li Mu's attention was all on Yuquan just now, so he did not notice that place. Now that he thought about it, he was shocked to find that the old man seemed to have been fishing there before he fled here. Looking at the fish basket next to him, there were already dozens of small fish in it. Based on the speed of ordinary people's fishing, it was not difficult to see that he had been here before Li Mu came to the Jianghu continent. He knew that he would come to the Jianghu continent before Li Mu and knew that he would be hunted down by Yuquan, so he came here in advance to wait for him. Was this the strongest person in Xuanzong? The old man put down the fishing rod and released all the fish in the basket into the sea. Then he turned around, revealing a face that Li Mu was no stranger to. This face was full of wrinkles and brown spots, and there were only a few strands of hair on his head. He was so old that he looked like he would step into a grave the next moment. But the appearance of such an old man made Yuquan's face turn solemn, then angry. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "Old ghost Xianxia, don't tell me you don't have your own matters to attend to?" Xianxia smiled and said, "This old man is just an idle person who should have died long ago. How could I have my own matters to attend to? I just got tired of fishing in the East Sea, so I came to the West Sea to fish. What, do you want to care about this?" Although Xianxia said so, who would travel tens of thousands of miles from the East Sea to the West Sea just to fish? Yuquan's face was gloomy and terrifying as he asked, "Xianxia, this man has a grudge against your Xuanzong for humiliating your sect. Not long ago, he led those people to force Xuanzong. Don't tell me you forgot about that?" Xianxia sighed and said, "I'm old and my memory isn't good. Is there such a thing?" Faced with Xianxia who was playing dumb, Yuquan didn't say anything else. At this time, more than 10 rays of light appeared in the distant sky. Yuan Luo led more than 10 people and quickly appeared behind Yuquan. Those people all exuded the aura of the 7th level, but compared to Li Mu and Xianxia's righteous aura, it seemed a little evil. Xianxia's gaze swept across the crowd, and a look of reminiscence appeared on his face. He said, "Fellow Taoist Yuan Luo, long time no see." When Yuan Luo saw Xianxia, veins popped out on his forehead. He said coldly, "Indeed, long time no see. If it weren't for you back then, I would have already stepped into the 8th level. Why would I need to reincarnate and cultivate again?" Yuan Luo's words were filled with endless resentment. At this moment, the wind and clouds in the sky reversed, and huge waves surged on the surface of the sea. Yuan Luo and Yuquan's group of more than 10 people faced off against Li Mu and Xianxia. The atmosphere was tense to the extreme. Chapter 644. The situation at the West Sea was in a stalemate. Even though Yuquan and Yuan Luo had the advantage in numbers, Li Mu and Xianxia were not to be trifled with. The existence of the sun-shooting bow in particular made Yuquan and Yuan Luo wary. The sun-shooting bow's power was limited in Li Mu's hands. However, if it was controlled by Xianxia, even Yuquan would not dare to take it head-on. There was a 90% chance that he would die on the spot if Xianxia used all his strength. If that arrow was shot at Yuan Luo, who had yet to advance, would definitely die. 10,000 years ago, they had dozens of senior and junior brothers. Now, there were only 4 of them left. The death of any one of them was something they could not accept. The two sides faced each other from a distance, and the surroundings were deathly silent. After a while, Xianxia spoke first. He looked at Yuquan and Yuan Luo and said, "The fish in the West Sea are too small. It's boring to fish. If there's nothing else, we'll go back first." Yuquan and Yuan Luo did not speak. Xianxia looked at Li Mu with a smile and said, "Little friend Li Mu, let's go." After saying that, he turned and flew to the east. Li Mu glanced at the demonic path crowd and followed behind Xianxia, leaving together with him. Beside Yuan Luo, a black-clothed man asked in confusion, "Sirs, are we just going to let them go?" Yuan Luo and Yuquan ignored him. They knew very well that the moment Xianxia appeared, they would not be able to do anything to Li Mu today. As one of the most difficult enemies of the sage sect in the past 10,000 years, Xianxia's reputation was not undeserved. Yuquan spat out a mouthful of turbid air and said, "There's no need to rush to deal with Xianxia. Senior brother Shen Tian has already returned to Ghost Island. When he finishes his seclusion, Xianxia will no longer be a threat." Senior brother Yuan Luo, come back with me. Yuan Luo nodded and ordered the people behind him. Gather all the elders above the 6th realm and return to the South Sea with me. The day I come out of seclusion will be the day I sweep through the 10 continents. At this time above the West Sea. Li Mu looked at Tianjizi's hunched back and asked, "Why did you save me?" Tianjizi smiled and said, "This old man already said that I only came to the Western Sea to fish and happened to run into you. Moreover, do you really need this old man to save you? Even if I don't do anything, the victor between you and Nether Spring is still between 40% and 60%. I'm afraid even Nether Spring himself doesn't know about this." Li Mu's pupils shrank. Tianjizi's divination skills were more powerful than he had imagined. Not only was he able to predict Li Mu's movements and the dangers he was about to encounter, he was even able to predict the outcome of the battle between him and Yu Quan. What else did he not know? Li Mu pondered for a moment and asked, "Senior Tianjizi, there's no need to show off your divination skills. Junior wants to know why you saved me again and again." Tianjizi was silent for a while before he turned to look at him and said, "In the future, the 10 continents can exist without me, but it can't exist without you." Li Mu knew that Tianjizi must have predicted something, so he asked, "Why?" Tianjizi shook his head and said, "This old man only predicted that the catastrophe of the 10 continents would come, and you are the only hope of the 10 continents. Anyone can die in the 10 continents, but you can't." Li Mu pondered again and asked, "When did you predict this?" Tianjizi said, "From the first time you stepped into Xuanzong." Li Mu was stunned for a moment, then he said angrily, "Then why did you allow Dao Qingzi to cover for Qingzi and deliberately let Xuanzong become enemies with Fulu School?" Li Mu didn't understand. Since Tianjizi had already predicted this, why didn't he tell him directly? Instead, he let him and Xuanzong become enemies. In 2 years, Xuanzong was reduced to such a state. What was he planning? Tianjizi looked at Li Mu and asked, "If Xuanzong had handed over Qingzi, little friend Li Mu, what would you have done in these 2 years?" Li Mu blurted out, "I." Just as he said this word, Li Mu froze in place. He didn't know how to answer Tianjizi's question for a moment. Of course, Tianjizi knew himself well. If Xuanzong had handed over Qingzi, Xiaobai would have been avenged, and the knot in her heart would have been untied. Perhaps she would have taken the initiative to give herself to him 2 years ago. In the beginning, Li Mu would have fallen into the gentle embrace of the little fox. Without the goal of avenging her, Li Mu naturally wouldn't have joined forces with the 5 Taoist sects. Perhaps to this day, he would still be Fulu School's hands-off manager. He wouldn't have cultivated desperately, thought of ways to improve the strength of the sect, and joined forces with the forces that could be joined. He would have had enough time to talk about love with the Empress. Their relationship would have been 1 step closer than it was now, or even 2 or 3 steps closer. He would often wander around the divine capital, the demon nation, and Mount Baiyun. Where would he find the time to cultivate? Immersed in the gentle embrace for 2 years, let alone transcend, he probably wouldn't even have the motivation to break through Dongxian. Li Mu looked at Tianjizi in shock and asked, "This is your goal?" Tianjizi asked, "What else could it be? Other than hatred, what else could make you do all this today?" Li Mu thought about it and realized that there really wasn't anything. Xiaobai was Li Mu's darling. Li Mu didn't want her to suffer any grievances, let alone the hatred of the extermination of his clan. If Tianjizi had told him that the catastrophe of the 10 continents was coming and he was the only savior, Li Mu would most likely have thought that he had dementia. To think that he had even calculated this. This old fellow really knew him well. Li Mu's face turned red, and he felt extremely awkward. He immediately changed the topic and said, "What catastrophe are you talking about? Is it the rise of the demon path?" Tianjizi shook his head and said, "I can only see a trace of the heavenly secrets. I can't see the specifics." In recent days, millions of people had died in Yenzhou and Jianghu continent. Corpses were everywhere, and the people were in a terrible situation. This was already considered the catastrophe of the 10 continents. If Yuan Luo and the demon path's first ancestor used this opportunity to advance, how could the righteous path's only Tianjizi, who was at the 8th level, contend against them? At that time, the 10 continents would completely fall into the hands of the demon path. This matter corresponded to the catastrophe that Tianjizi had predicted. Li Mu heaved a long sigh of relief and continued to ask, "What should I do?" Tianjizi shook his head and said, "I don't know. You have to ask yourself about this matter." Li Mu didn't know what he should do at this moment. He had already done what he could. Combining all the forces that could be combined to resist the demon path was all he could do. However, this still didn't change the fact that the demon path was about to have 3 8th-level cultivators. Among the demon path's third ancestor, Tianjizi could deal with one, and Li Mu could barely stop the other. However, what about the last one? After advancing to the 8th level, one would be able to expand one's domain. Those with lower cultivation than him would not be able to mobilize the power of heaven and earth within a certain range. For cultivators, if they couldn't mobilize the power of heaven and earth, they could only use about 50% of their full strength. Even if 10 people joined forces, they might not be a match for the last 8th-level demon path's first ancestor. Of course, if dozens of people ganged up on him and didn't borrow the power of heaven and earth, they would be able to fight against the 8th-level demon path's first ancestor with just their own magic power. They might even be able to kill the 8th-level demon path's first ancestor. However, at least half of the dozens of people ganging up on him would be killed. This was something that Li Mu absolutely could not accept. Moreover, the demon path didn't only have the third ancestor. The number of 7th-level cultivators in the 3 great altars added together might not be as many as Li Mu's alliance, but it wouldn't be much less. If everyone joined forces to deal with Yu Quan, who would deal with the demon path's first ancestor? Li Mu could also give the sun shooting bow to Tianjizi. This seemed like a good idea, but the problem was that Tianjizi could kill an 8th-level demon path's first ancestor at the cost of exhausting all his magic power. At that time, the remaining 2 8th-level demon path's first ancestor could easily kill him. This was nothing more than a 1-for-1 exchange between Tianjizi and the demon path. Even if Li Mu was willing, Tianjizi probably wouldn't be willing. At present, the only way was to kill the first ancestor and second ancestor of the demon path before they broke through to the 7th level. This way, finding the Ghost Island would become the most important thing. The Ghost Island was located in the depths of the sea and was difficult to find. Moreover, there were countless demon paths' first ancestor guarding it. Apart from Tianjizi, anyone who went to the Ghost Island would be sending themselves to their deaths. Unless the one searching for the Ghost Island wasn't a human. Half a day later, at White Cloud Mountain, Ao Feng heard Li Mu's words and shook his head repeatedly. He firmly said, "No, the lives of our dragon race are also lives. What's the difference between finding the demon path's lair and rushing to our deaths?" Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "When you find the Ghost Island, I'll extend your lifespan." Ao Feng's expression gradually turned solemn. He righteously said, "Leave this matter to us. Our dragon race is also a peace-loving race. The demon path's evil deeds are unforgivable. We and the demon path are absolutely irreconcilable." Chapter 645. The Ghost Island was located in the depths of the South Sea, and only the dragon race had the ability to take the risk to search for it. Even if they were discovered, as long as they escaped into the deep sea, even Yu Quan would feel powerless. For tens of thousands of years, the resource-rich ocean had been occupied by the dragon race because of their unique racial talent. Even if the humans and demons coveted it, they couldn't compete with the dragon race in the deep sea. This was only one of the arrangements. After all, Li Mu couldn't pin all his hopes on the dragon race to find the other 2 ancestors of the demonic path before they advanced. He had to make more comprehensive arrangements. It would be great if he could advance to the 8th realm as soon as possible. Although the 8th realm was a whole new world and couldn't be compared to the 7th realm, and he couldn't defeat several people alone, he still had the confidence to fight 1 against 2. At that time, together with Tianjizi, they could compete with the 3 ancestors of the demonic path. Xianming could be handed over to the Empress. After restraining Xianming, no one in the demonic path would be a match for Zhou Zhong, Fu Daozi, and the Ghost Servant. Together with Ao Feng and the others, their strength would be enough to form an overwhelming advantage. However, the Dao integration realm wasn't something that Li Mu could advance just because he wanted to. The first and second ancestors of the demonic path were originally at the peak of the 7th realm. In order to break through to the 8th realm, they slaughtered tens of millions of lives in Yenzhou and Jianghu continent. Their advancement was made with the lives of tens of millions of people. Li Mu wouldn't and couldn't do that. Among the thousands of techniques in the cultivation world, there was no faster shortcut than the demonic path. Li Mu looked at Tianjizi and asked, "Senior Tianjizi, how did you advance back then?" Tianjizi said, "I'm ashamed to say that all the spirit crystals of Xuanzong's ancestors were wasted on me. The most important part of the inheritance of the six sects was the cultivation crystals condensed by the ancestors before their lifespans were exhausted. Apart from Fu Daozi, all the seventh realm experts of the six sects advanced through this method. No wonder there were so few seventh realm experts in Xuanzong. It turned out that they used all their spirit crystals to create an eighth realm expert. Otherwise, the Xian sect would have more powerhouses in the Nirvana realm than the other five sects combined. But at the same time, they wouldn't have any powerhouses of the 8th level protecting them. Perhaps they would have been destroyed by the demonic path a long time ago." Li Mu was unable to replicate Tianjizi's path of advancement. Each sect had a limited amount of spiritual crystals. Up until now, almost all of them had been used up. Even if the six sects gave their last spiritual crystals to Li Mu, it was still far from enough. Li Mu suddenly had an idea. The mantra of Tao Te Ching, as his last trump card, was more powerful than the sun-shooting bow. With his current cultivation, he still could not use it. If he borrowed the mana of Tianjizi, what would happen? As long as his primordial spirit temporarily possessed Li Mu would be able to start the experiment. He looked back at Divine Predictor, but before he could speak, Divine Predictor pinched his fingers and said, "Although I don't know what you're going to say, this old man has calculated that what you're going to do next has a 90% chance of destroying my body and soul. This method absolutely cannot work." Since Divine Predictor had said so, Li Mu could only give up. It seemed that even if Li Mu advanced to the 8th realm one day, he still could not uncover the secrets of Tao Te Ching. However, Li Mu had a faint premonition in his heart that the backlash of the power of heaven and earth was not without a limit. When he was strong enough to withstand this huge power of heaven and earth, he would completely master these mantras. At that time, the mystery of Tao Te Ching would be completely revealed before his eyes. Li Mu no longer bothered about this matter and said to Divine Predictor, "Senior Divine Predictor, can you let me take a look at the heavenly book of Xuanzong?" Already knowing Divine Predictor's intentions, Li Mu did not stand on ceremony with him. Divine Predictor stretched out his hand, and a simple page appeared. It was the last page of the heavenly book of the 6 sections. Divine Predictor said, "Since the heavenly book of the 5 sects is already in your hands, you can also take this page of the heavenly book." Li Mu separated his divine sense and sank his consciousness into the heavenly book. The contents of the heavenly book of the 6 sects were similar. In the heavenly book of Xuanzong, there were also the figures of giant beasts and a group of ancient cultivators using mysterious techniques to fight against their enemies. Li Mu swept through those techniques, focusing all his attention on the divination. This was the supreme technique of Xuanzong. When one cultivated to the highest level, one could foresee the future. Even Divine Predictor only understood the surface. Li Mu pinched his fingers with one hand. Divine Predictor reminded, "Anyone who tries to pry into the secrets of heaven will be bitten by the secrets of heaven." Countless seniors of Xuanzong were proficient in this Tao, but they all fell before their lifespan was exhausted. "You have to be careful." Li Mu nodded and said, "I know." With the rise of the demonic path and the impending calamity of the continent, there were many other things that needed to be prepared besides cultivating diligently. The many forces of the continent could no longer be like before, scattered everywhere like a plate of loose sand. It would be extremely easy for the demonic path to take them down one by one. Although there was a long-distance teleportation formation, it consumed a large amount of spiritual jades every time it was activated. It was extremely inconvenient. It was better to gather all the experts in one place so that they could be mobilized in the fastest and most timely manner. After discussing with Divine Predictor, Li Mu chose a small coastal country in the south. The battle that was about to happen in the future would be an earth-shattering one. Several 8th-level cultivators and dozens of 7th-level cultivators would participate in the battle. It would be an apocalyptic scene. It was best for the battlefield to be in a remote and uninhabited place. The people of the small country in the south would gradually move inland. The experts of the 6 sects of Taoism, the 4 sects of Buddhism, the Yao Nation, the Ghost Realm, the Yong Nation, and the Great Zhou would establish a line of defense on the shores of the South Sea. That was the first line of defense, and also the last line of defense. If they won, the 10 continents would be at peace. If they lost, the 10 continents would be completely invaded by the demonic path. The divine capital. The people who knew nothing were happy. The battle between the righteous and demonic paths had nothing to do with them. They only knew that their lives were stable now, and the great Zhou was growing stronger day by day. They would have a long period of good days in the future. Not many of the officials and nobles in the imperial court knew the inside story. Only a few people knew that the deans and vice-deans of the 4 major academies had already left the divine capital. Her Majesty the Empress also hadn't attended court for many days. Above the clouds above the divine capital, 2 figures that were hard to see with the naked eye shuttled through the clouds. The light of spells illuminated the white clouds in colors. No matter how Li Mu and the Empress cultivated, it was impossible for them to break through their cultivation level in a short period of time. He could only impart everything that he knew to them. Even if the Empress couldn't display the full might of those mystical powers and Dao techniques like Li Mu, she could still improve a part of her abilities. At a certain moment, Li Mu's figure appeared above the clouds. He looked at the Empress and said, "That's enough. Your Majesty should have no opponent below the 8th level." Zhou Yi looked at Li Mu and said, "So you've been going easy on me." When Li Mu had just entered the 7th level, he hadn't comprehended the power of domains. It was indeed difficult for him to defeat the Empress. But when he learned how to use domains, the Empress was no longer his opponent. However, Li Mu had never used the power of domains on her. Li Mu held her hand and walked on the clouds. He smiled and said, "If I don't go easy on your Majesty, should I go easy on others?" Zhou Yi stopped and leaned on Li Mu's shoulder. She asked softly, "Can we win?" Li Mu held her slender waist and said with certainty, "We definitely can." This sentence was only used by Li Mu to comfort the Empress. Whether they could win against the ancestors of the demonic path or not, Li Mu wasn't completely sure. Tian Jizi could predict that the calamity was coming. He could predict that Li Mu had a chance of survival, but he couldn't predict what method he would use to break it. Li Mu also didn't know. There was no way he could deal with that extra 8th level powerhouse. After sending the Empress back to the palace, Li Mu flew back into the clouds. He closed his eyes and chanted a spell. He formed a seal with one hand and used a divination technique. But all he saw was darkness. At the same time, a massive power of heaven and earth emerged from the void. Li Mu grunted and an abnormal flush appeared on his face. He had already been lightly injured. Those who divined into the secrets of the heavens would definitely suffer a backlash. But Li Mu didn't give up. He formed another seal and all he saw was darkness. This darkness had no boundary. It stretched up and down endlessly, left and right. The entire world was filled with a kind of extreme darkness. He divined a great battle with the demonic path. This indicated that in the current situation, they had no hope of winning. Just as Li Mu was about to give up, a faint light suddenly appeared in a certain direction in the darkness. This light was very dim. Li Mu almost missed it. But it was indeed the only light in the endless darkness. Li Mu opened his eyes and looked in a certain direction. That was the direction of the light in the darkness. That glimmer of light represented hope. And that direction was Yingzhou. Li Mu didn't delay. He walked all the way to the northeast. Soon, a vast land appeared in front of him. This was Yingzhou, a barren land adjacent to the Zhu continent. Mo Li and the tens of thousands of soldiers of the Great Zhou would be conducting research on mechanisms here. But Li Mu wasn't here to find them. He went all the way into Yingzhou. After passing through countless places filled with smoke and miasma, he finally arrived at a mountain range. This mountain range stretched endlessly, but there was no poisonous miasma. The reason was that there wasn't a single blade of grass in this mountain range. There were no poisonous plants or plants that could produce miasma. The entire mountain range was filled with a thick corpse aura. Li Mu floated in the air. He looked around and soon saw a familiar figure. Xianming also didn't expect that Li Mu would come here. His expression changed drastically. He said in surprise, "What are you doing here?" When enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Xianming and Li Mu met here. The atmosphere instantly became tense. A battle was about to break out. Suddenly, a deep voice came from the mountain range. "It's you!" A sturdy figure flew out from a mountain. This figure carried a thick corpse aura. Li Mu was shocked. This person's aura easily overshadowed his and Xian Ming's. It was comparable to Yu Quan and Tian Jizi's. This was actually an expert of the 8th realm. Li Mu looked at the figure that was gradually becoming clearer. He lowered his voice and said, "Emperor Bai." Chapter 646. Li Mu had not seen the White Emperor demonic corpse ever since they parted ways at the Demon Emperor cave abode. He had even forgotten about its existence. Emperor Bai was an expert from the demon clan 3,000 years ago. His cultivation had reached the 9th realm. At that time, 9th realm experts were extremely rare. In the entire 10 continents, they could be counted with one hand. It was a pity that such an expert was still limited by his lifespan. However, Emperor Bai did not face death calmly. Before he died, he ordered all his subordinates to be buried with him. He also sacrificed their corpses and waited for a few thousand years for someone to break into the Demon Emperor cave abode and absorb their blood essence to be revived. Later on, his plan succeeded. However, he was persuaded by Li Mu's glib tongue. He gave up his memories of Emperor Bai and even the Demon Emperor cave abode. He then disappeared without a trace. Who would have thought that he would come to Yingzhou and reach the 8th level without anyone noticing? Li Mu was not surprised by Baidi's demonic corpse's cultivation level. Li Mu had refined 2 level 7 demonic corpses from his 2 level 8 demonic corpses. Baidi's cultivation level had reached level 9, and his physical body was extremely strong. As long as he had time, it was only a matter of time before his physical body recovered to level 8. The moment he saw Emperor Bai, Li Mu finally understood what that slim chance of survival represented. If he could recruit Emperor Bai, then even if the 3 ancestors of the demonic way gathered, they would not have any advantage. This was because Li Mu and the others only lacked a peak 8th realm expert. Xian Ming probably came here with the same goal as Li Mu. Although he did not know how she knew about Emperor Bai's whereabouts, if Emperor Bai was recruited by the demonic way, they would have no chance at all. Li Mu put these thoughts aside. He clasped his hands together and said to the White Emperor demonic corpse, "Senior, long time no see." Xian Ming and Li Mu knew each other's thoughts. After Li Mu spoke, Xian Ming immediately said, "Taoist White Emperor, this person has a clever mouth and is good at deceiving people. No matter what he says, don't believe him." Since Emperor Bai had appeared, Demon Dao had been paying attention to him and searching for him everywhere. This time, his 2 senior brothers were in seclusion. Xian Ming had come here specially. It would be best if he could recruit Emperor Bai. If he couldn't, he had to persuade him not to be recruited by Li Mu. Unexpectedly, as soon as she arrived, she met Li Mu. If White Emperor was deceived by Li Mu, in addition to Tian Jizi, it would be a great threat to them. She could not sit back and watch such a thing happen. Li Mu glanced at Xian Ming and said to Emperor Bai, "Predecessor Emperor Bai, listen to her. What is she talking about? What is she talking about? You are a monster. She looks down on the monster tribe, which means she looks down on you. You can't listen to her." When Emperor Bai heard this, he looked at Xian Ming and gradually frowned. Xian Ming did not expect Li Mu's angle to be so tricky. His expression changed and he immediately explained, "I didn't mean that. Taoist White Emperor, you should be able to feel that our auras are of the same origin. We are the same kind. This person is from the alien tribe. He is not one of us. His heart must be different. Don't be deceived by him." Li Mu, of course, would not let Xian Ming do as he wished. He quickly said, "Her chest is so big. Both of us are flat. We are the same kind." Emperor Bai looked at Li Mu and then at Xian Ming. He found that Xian Ming's aura was very similar to his. On the other hand, Li Mu's aura made him faintly disgusted. However, in terms of chest, both of them were indeed different from the other person. Hesitation appeared on his face. He couldn't tell which of the 2 people in front of him was his friend. Li Mu glared at Xian Ming. The advantage he had just established was almost completely reversed by her. After all, Emperor Bai was a corpse cultivator. Xian Ming was also a corpse cultivator. As an outsider, he did not have the advantage to compete with Xian Ming. Fortunately, the demonic corpse Bai in front of them was not the real Emperor Bai. Emperor Bai was the former king of the demon tribe. He was cunning and astute. His way of doing things was also demonic. It was very likely that he would stand on the side of demonic. The demonic corpse Bai in front of them did not have Emperor Bai's memory. He was a new individual. He had the strength of an 8th realm and the intelligence of an 8-year-old. Li Mu had been fighting with Su Miao in the ghost domain all day long. He was very experienced in dealing with this kind of spiritual corpse. With the intelligence of the demonic corpse Bai, he obviously did not know who to listen to. He scanned the two of them and asked, "What are you doing here?" Xian Ming said impatiently, "Taoist White Emperor, it has been 3,000 years. My senior brother and I would like to invite you to the Ghost Island for a chat." Li Mu interrupted, "Senior, the Emperor Bai she is talking about is the demonic Emperor Bai, not you. If you go to the demonic territory, perhaps your intelligence will be erased again and you will become their puppet. Demonic Tao likes to do this kind of thing the most. The Ghost Island she is talking about has 3 existences as strong as you. Senior, please reconsider." Xian Ming glared at Li Mu and quickly explained, "Taoist White Emperor, don't listen to her words. You are a guest of the Ghost Island. We will not do such things to you." Li Mu glanced at her and said to Emperor Bai, "A woman's mouth is a liar. You can't believe her words. When you go to the Ghost Island, your life and death will be in their hands. You will not be able to control it anymore." Xian Ming was furious. "Li Mu!" Li Mu squinted at her. "So?" At this moment, Emperor Bai looked at the two of them and said, "You two can go. I will stay here. I will not go anywhere." Before Xian Ming could speak, Li Mu sighed and said, "Senior, you are not experienced enough. You are too naive. With the way the demonic Tao does things, they will destroy what they can't get. If you let her go, I am afraid she will lead the experts of the demonic Tao to annihilate you soon." Hearing this, the demonic corpse Bai's eyes moved slowly. Although he had just gained sentience not long ago, he was not stupid. Li Mu's words made him a little wary. Seeing this, Xian Ming immediately formed a seal with one hand and said, "I can swear that we will never do such a thing." Li Mu used his specialty and fanned the flames, saying, "The oath of the demonic Tao cannot be trusted. Senior Emperor Bai, why don't you come with me? We only have 1/8 realm cultivator here. They will not harm you. At the very least, even if we want to harm you, you can leave at any time. But if you go to them, you will face 3 experts of the same level. If something happens, I am afraid you will not have much power to fight back." Under Li Muxiao's persuasion, the White Emperor seemed to have been moved. With his current intelligence, it was hard for him to understand some complicated things. Unknowingly, his mind was being led by Li Mu. Xian Ming did not expect that Li Mu would interfere in the successful recruitment. With just a few words, he persuaded Emperor Bai. Seeing that the situation was gradually getting out of control, she immediately gave up trying to rope him in. She turned into a white light and was about to leave. It was not easy to meet Xian Ming alone. How could Li Mu let her go so easily? Almost at the next moment when Xian Ming was about to move, he reminded Emperor Bai, "Senior, you can't let her go like this." After being led by Li Mu, Emperor Bai subconsciously believed that the demonic Tao wanted to harm him. Now that he saw Xian Ming escape, he thought that she was going to ask for help. His body shook and an invisible force spread out. Xian Ming's body suddenly stopped strangely in the void. This was the power of a 8th realm expert's domain. If Li Mu had comprehended it earlier, Xian Ming would have fallen into his hands. Li Mu did not waste this opportunity. A golden light flew out from his hand. The golden light turned into a huge golden talisman in the air and landed on Xian Ming's body. This was the talisman that Fu Daozi had drawn. Xian Ming's body was restrained and she could not escape. After the talisman entered her body, even her spiritual power was sealed. Li Mu then tied her up tightly with the holy binding chains. He cupped his fists at Emperor Bai and said, "Senior, we can't stay here for long. Let's leave quickly." After what had happened just now, Emperor Bai and Li Mu had established a preliminary trust. He nodded and quickly left with Li Mu. Li Mu headed south and was filled with emotions. If he had not persuaded the demonic corpse to give up Emperor Bai's memory that day, he would have buried a huge hidden danger today. It was much easier to persuade an 8-year-old demonic corpse than to persuade Emperor Bai. It was because of the cause that day that the consequences of today were born. On the shore of the South Sea, in the palace of a small country in the south, 2 streamers landed from afar. A few figures immediately flew over from afar. Fu Daozi and the supreme elders of the other sects were shocked when they saw Emperor Bai standing beside Li Mu. They were already in the seventh realm, but the muscular man beside Li Mu was still as majestic as a mountain in their eyes. After Li Mu introduced them, they hurriedly cupped their fists and bowed. "Greetings, Senior Emperor Bai." Although he had followed Li Mu back, Emperor Bai did not completely trust him. Seeing everyone's attitude, Emperor Bai let down his guard slightly. He sensed a few powerful demonic auras and 10 corpse auras. These auras made him feel very close. Li Mu gave the Heaven Lord of Illusions a look and said, "Father-in-law, Senior Emperor Bai used to be the emperor of the demon race. I will let the demon race take care of him." The Heaven Lord of Illusions was very meticulous. He understood Li Mu's intention with just a look. The war with the demon race was imminent. If they could keep Emperor Bai here, it would undoubtedly be a strong ally. As for how to keep Emperor Bai here, it would depend on the demon race. After the Heaven Lord of Illusions left with Emperor Bai, Li Mu did not stay idle. He contacted Xianxia with a sound transmission Dharma artifact and said, "Come to the South Sea and bring along a few female corpses that you have refined. Remember to make sure that they are good-looking." After arranging this, he sent a message to Tianjizi and then came to a palace. Li Mu waved his hand and released Xianming, who had his magic power sealed. Tianjizi looked at Xianming and said with a hint of emotion, "Daoist Xianming, we meet again." Xianming glanced at Tianjizi and Li Mu indifferently. Then, she pursed her lips and asked, "Do you think you can stop my 3 senior brothers just because you found Emperor Bai?" Li Mu looked at her indifferently and said, "Yuan Luo and Xian Tian used the lives of millions of people in the Ku continent and Yenzhou continent to advance to the Dao integration realm. What do you have to be proud of?" Xianming did not show any compassion when she mentioned the lives of millions of people. Her eyes were cold and emotionless. She said coldly, "So what if we kill everyone in the 10 continents? You owe us this." Chapter 647. Xianming's righteous tone made Li Mu angry. He asked, "In the past 10,000 years, you diabolism have been stirring up storms in the continent to get the tomes of arcane and the secret of immortality. Hundreds of millions of innocent people have died in your hands. Who owes whom?" Xianming's face was still cold. She gritted her teeth and said, "The descendants of those people deserve to die." Li Mu looked at Xianming, who had a trace of madness on her face. After taking a deep breath, he gradually calmed down and asked, "Who are those people you are talking about?" Xianming sneered and said, "Those who call themselves the righteous sections. Your ancestors are a group of selfish, treacherous, and shameless people." Li Mu moved a chair and sat in front of Xianming. He continued to ask, "What happened 10,000 years ago?" Through the tomes of arcane, Li Mu could see part of the truth of what happened 10,000 years ago. However, it was just fragments. Xianming and the others were the ones who had experienced what happened 10,000 years ago. They must know more than Li Mu. Facing Li Mu's question, Xianming closed her eyes. It seemed that she didn't want to talk more about what happened 10,000 years ago. Li Mu looked at her and sneered. He said, "When it comes to treachery, who is more treacherous than you diabolism? In the past, the strong warriors of the righteous and the diabolism fought against the strange beasts together. Many ancestors sacrificed themselves in exchange for the stability of the 10 continents. Look at what you have done in the past 10,000 years. Are you worthy of your ancestors?" When the strange beasts still wreaked havoc in the 10 continents, the righteous and the diabolism had a common enemy. In order to fight against the strange beasts, the diabolism had also made great sacrifices. Li Mu saw this from the tomes of arcane. After Li Mu finished speaking, Xianming seemed to be stimulated. He suddenly opened his eyes and said angrily, "Bull ****. In order to protect the people of the 10 continents, 99% of the 100,000 disciples of the sage sect died on the battlefield of the strange beasts. Many precursors of the sage sect did not hesitate to explode themselves and die together with the beasts. However, what did they get in return? Those people opened the gate of heaven, found the Tao Yuan, destroyed the road to heaven, and enjoyed their immortality. They only left the strange beasts for us." Being stimulated by Li Mu, Xianming revealed more information. Li Mu knew that in the past, because the people of the demonic path were no match for the strange beasts, they could only self-detonate and perish together with them. However, the heavenly gate, paradise, and path to heaven that the calculator of Xianming mentioned were all unfamiliar terms to him. Li Mu looked at Tianjizi and found that he wasn't surprised. Li Mu asked in a low voice, "You know about this?" Tianjizi nodded, then shook his head and said, "No one knows the truth of 10,000 years ago. This is only their guess." At that time, the Taoist sect had not yet appeared. The ancestors of Xuanzong only found some clues through some ancient books. Li Mu asked, "What clues?" Tianjizi was silent for a moment and said, "More than 10,000 years ago, the ancient cultivators were all looking for a place called the Taoyuan. It was said that in the Taoyuan, one could ignore the laws of heaven and earth. After cultivating to a certain level, one could obtain immortality. As long as they found the gate of heaven, they could find the road to heaven and enter the Taoyuan. At that time, the strange beasts were still wreaking havoc in the 10 continents. As the most powerful sect in the 10 continents, the sage sect led the ancient cultivators to fight against the strange beasts." Li Mu continued to ask, "What happened after that?" Tianjizi let out a long sigh and said, "Some of the ancient cultivators found the gate of heaven overseas and then disappeared completely, never to be seen again. The 6 sects of the Taoist sect inherited the orthodoxy of their descendants. The gate of heaven." Li Mu thought of the illusory door that appeared after the tomes of arcane were gathered. But at that time, the tomes of arcane should have been scattered in the 10 continents and could not be gathered. The so-called gate of heaven should not be the door he saw. Tianjizi's words indirectly confirmed that Xianming was not lying. Combined with the picture that Li Mu saw from the tomes of arcane, he had sorted out the complete picture in his mind. In the ancient times, the strange beasts and the human race coexisted in the 10 continents. At that time, the sage sect was the most powerful sect in the 10 continents with 100,000 disciples. Even now, there was no sect that could compare with it. The sage sect at that time was not the demon sect of today. Although their cultivation methods were strange, they did not kill people. In order to exterminate the strange beasts, the sage sect paid a painful price. Those ancient cultivators found the gate of heaven, which should have been a good thing for everyone to embark on the path to immortality. But after they stepped into the Taoyuan, they destroyed the path to heaven, leaving the sage sect to fight against the strange beasts alone. In the end, all the experts of the sage sect fell in the war with the strange beasts, leaving only Xianming and the others, who were the ancestors of the devil sect. In the past 10,000 years, they held the hatred for the descendants of the ancient cultivators and stirred up conflicts on the continent. They made the sage sect, which originally belonged to the righteous camp, completely become the demon sect. On the one hand, they were seeking revenge. On the other hand, they were looking for the tomes of arcane, wanting to use the tomes of arcane to reopen the gate of heaven. Li Mu still had one thing that he did not understand. He asked, "Why did they destroy the path to heaven?" Xianming's chest rose and fell. She gritted her teeth and said, "Because the spiritual qi is limited. It will become thinner with time. The more cultivators there are, the faster the spiritual qi will become thinner. It will become harder and harder for experts to appear. When the spiritual qi in the 10 continents is exhausted, there will be no more cultivators. They don't want too many people to go to the Taoyuan, and they don't want people to compete with them for the spiritual qi in the Taoyuan." Li Mu was silent for a long time before he said, "This is not a reason for you to kill other innocent creatures. Even if the ancient cultivators were wrong, in the past 10,000 years, the innocent people who died in their hands were not wrong. The ancestors of the devil sect had witnessed the destruction of their sect and the betrayal of their allies. Their hearts had long been occupied by hatred. Hatred made them act in an extreme way, and it also created the evil reputation of the devil sect for 10,000 years. Li Mu did not ask Xianming any more questions. He sent her back to the teapot space. Tianjizi clasped his hands behind his back and said slowly, "She is right about one thing. The spiritual qi is limited. One day, the spiritual qi in the 10 continents will be exhausted. At that time, there will be no more cultivators, and the demon clan will not be able to gain intelligence. The 10 continents will become a dead land," Li Mu murmured, "just like the teapot space that has lost its master. After losing its master, the spiritual qi in the teapot space would slowly dissipate. 3,000 years after Emperor Bai's death, his teapot space became a dead land. After Li Mu obtained it, it reconnected with the outside world and began to regain its vitality." Tianjizi nodded. Then he said self-deprecatingly, perhaps the 10 continents is also someone else's teapot space, and we are just living creatures in the teapot space. This idea was a little too bold, but it was not impossible. If the teapot space was big enough, the people living in it would not realize that they were in the teapot space. However, to be able to own such a big teapot space, his cultivation must have surpassed the 9th realm. He must have reached a level that Li Mu could not imagine. There were too many secrets about the 10 continents. Li Mu did not forget that there was an unbreakable layer of astral wind above them. In the demon clan's heavenly book, there was also a scene of a 9th realm heavenly demon banging his head against the sky. Since ancient times, there must have been more than one person who had doubts about this. The living creatures of the various races had never stopped searching for the answer to this question. Li Mu stretched out his hand. More than 10 pages of heavenly books appeared in his palm. The illusory door appeared again. At this time, the door was clearer than before. Tianjizi stared at the door and asked, "Is this the gate of heaven?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I don't know." Before gathering all 24 pages of the heavenly book, no one knew what was behind this door. Would it be the legendary paradise that could allow one to break through the limit of one's lifespan and enjoy eternal life? Li Mu suddenly thought of the sky pilfering array. Li Mu knew the principle of the heavenly secret talisman very well. It extended one's lifespan for a short period of time by concealing the secrets of the heavens. However, the sky pilfering array that could extend one's lifespan by 60 years was still a mystery. At this moment, Li Mu suddenly had a guess. Could the whirlpool above the array and the strange power that appeared from the whirlpool have come from the paradise? You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.